right now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, December 21st policy meeting. Before we get going here, I do have a statement that I need to read. Notice is hereby given that the school board is convening this policy committee meeting on December 21st, 2020. On December 11th, 2020, Governor Pritzker issued a gubernatorial disaster proclamation for all counties in the state of Illinois. In coordination of this and due to the COVID-19 health pandemic, Board President Nicholas Mannheim has determined that a full, accessible in-person meeting on December 21st, 2020 is not practical or prudent. As permitted by Public Act 101-640, this meeting is being held without the physical presence of a quorum at the District Administration Center location. Citizens and staff may view the meeting via a live stream of the meeting by visiting a link located on the District 303 website. The recording secretary is directed to include this determination in the minutes of this meeting. No votes will be taken at this committee meeting. Each board member shall now announce his or her presence in the virtual meeting and confirm that he or she can hear other board members. So if you wouldn't mind going around the Zoom and just letting everyone know that you can hear.
Hi, Jillian Barker, and I can hear.
Ed McNally, I am able to hear board members.
Becky McCabe, board member, and I can hear.
Carolyn Weibel, I can hear.
All right. And then, so also then Mr. McNally today is, he will not be joining us. He's still a little bit under the weather. And then Mrs. Weibel will be joining us with audio only this evening.
That was Mr. Mannheim, not me. Mr. McNally is here.
I'm sorry. My apologies, Mr. McNally.
No worries,
Mr.
no worries. I'm feeling well.
All right. So today's meeting, we have one item that needs to, actually, before we do that, we do not have any citizen comments for this meeting. There are some that will be played during the L&T meeting at 5:30 or when that meeting starts. And then also, Dr. Pearson, do you have any superintendent update for the policy meeting?
I do not, no.
All right, thank you very much. Then, as I said, we have one agenda item that we have for discussion today. That's policy 2110, qualifications, term, and duties of board officers. And this has been on our radar for some time now. It's been partially discussed, I would say, over the last 6 months to a year, and we've talked about it a little bit here and there, but I think finally now it's time to have a little deeper discussion about it. Mrs. Barker and Mrs. McCabe have done a bit of work on this and putting some of this together. So I want to thank them for this, for the work they did on this policy. There are two parts of it. And the first one, these are all in your board packet. Board officer practices, that is more of just procedures or not so much policy, but kind of maybe what we feel board members, the responsibilities of board members and the officer roles that they have. And then also there are some changes to policy 2110 as well. I just actually, I also received a message from Mrs. Fairgrieve that she's having trouble getting connected right now. So I'm hoping that she'll be joining us in a minute. So again, there are two parts to the discussion today. I think it would probably be best if we talked about the practices first, because I think that is going to have, once we're done talking about that, that will kind of drive our decision on possible policy changes. So would either maybe Mrs. Barker or Mrs. McCabe want to just kind of briefly explain your process on this?
The position practices, if you have it printed out, if you're looking for it, it says position practices up here, and then it has some highlighted yellow areas. It starts out really with some generalized statements. And we did leave a question there. Are there any other general statements to be added to this section? So that's something to chime in on as well. And then there's some board member reminders, and Mrs. McCabe, these reminders came from, we have this cited where on the second page, right before the president's competencies start. So if you're wondering where that came from, it came from the school board president role and responsibilities, just some reminders about how board members are to interact with the superintendent and the administrative team. And then if you go to that second page, that's where it starts. You can see each position, each officer position has some competencies, some things that, due to the nature of the position, it would be good that that person had those skills. So something to think about if you're interested in that role. And then it goes into position practices. So some of these things that they just have to do on a day-to-day basis, or do it at special times, or they can then delegate to another position. And so some of those things are anything from making sure all voices are heard, to following Robert's Rules of Order and to ensure a fair process, and kind of going into other things that you might see, maybe dealing with a conflict. Same thing as you go into vice president. Competencies are listed there, and then some position practices that would help, the flow of the school year, rather than kind of those things just coming upon us and not really knowing, who's doing what and where, until someone kind of just grabs it. And then the secretary, and these things kind of go with their role in policy as well. Same thing, competencies, and then some position practices.
And if I can just jump in, with the secretary, the highlighted part there is that the position says that the secretary is the official keeper of policy.
And that is part of the policy. So in the practices, it just makes sense that that person is a co-chair or chair of the policy. I mean, obviously not, that right now we're not doing that, but this is obviously we're saying next set of term, that whoever that person would be, that would be the ideal committee for them, or one of the committees they might be part of. As we dove into this, we realized more things about that that made sense. Is there any other highlight I didn't hit, Mrs. McCabe?
Not for there's one more under committee chairs, but you got all of them.
So yeah, on that, so if you turn to committee chairs, it also gives a little more direction about that role. And it goes from anything to reports to the president, sets the agenda, things that we kind of do anyway. And then I added that co-chairs are responsible for leading the discussion and the process of the items on the agenda.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions on anything that Mrs. Barker discussed? Again, thank you for both of you for your work on this.
Mr. Bryant, Mrs. Fairgrave joined us. I didn't know if you saw that.
Yes. Ms. Fairgrave, welcome.
Thank you. I got connected. Thank you.
So, yeah, we've just been looking at our the position practices for board officers and committees. Mrs. Barker has just gone over the responsibilities and practices of the officers. And again, does anyone have any questions at this point?
And just as a reminder, this is not policy. So this is not something we will vote on. It can change over time. It can change board to board, but we felt it was important to get these kinds of components into the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's great to see this in writing, just so everyone understands the roles and responsibilities of each position and in the board and committee chairs and so forth.
Yeah, and as we, may welcome new members, board members, I thought it might be helpful. I know when we had to make some decisions right off the bat when some of us were new, I know that it was kind of hard to figure out, okay, what is the role of the people we're now voting on after we just got sworn in. So I thought this could be helpful. I know Mrs. McCabe thought it could be helpful for that as well, like almost handbook kind of thing.
I would just like to say thank you very much for doing this. I know this is something the past boards have talked about doing, and due to workloads have not been able to put down on paper. So very much appreciate you both taking the time to do that. I think it does just clarify some options. Again, as boards shift and they want to rearrange responsibilities, they can do so now that it's clearly identified. So thank you for that.
All right, any other questions or comments? Just a quick poll here, I guess. Is everyone good with continuing forth with using these? Again, this is not policy, just more of roles and responsibilities of officers and committee members. Just, again, I just want to make sure everyone's good with it. Okay, I'm not seeing any objections, so awesome. Then let's go to the same agenda item, but this is the policy now, 2110. There are some changes to this policy. Does let's see, does anyone want to take this one, or
Sure.
Ms. Barker, you want to take this one as well? Again, thank
Sure.
you.
And Ms. McCabe, jump in whenever. There are two documents. One is a red line that will help you identify what is there currently, and then what maybe was added or switched or changed or whatever. And then there's the other one with the highlights on the board policy. That's what it would look like if everything was added in. So I think for right now, I think the red line one's probably the most helpful. For president, obviously the biggest part of the biggest potential change we've discussed or discussed both ways, leaving it the same or adding the 2-year, just as that 2-year term. So if you see that up there, that's the biggest piece of it. Some other highlights for the president would be adding the regular and special meetings. It says all meetings right now. And then adding meeting with the superintendent and the vice president prior to each board meeting to set an agenda on appropriate content, but that's something that occurs now anyway. And then where it says number 4, making all board committee appointments determined in an agreement with board officers.
Which is a change.
Right.
Right now, I believe the president is the one who makes those decisions, and the recommendation is that it works as elected officers together.
Mrs. Barker, can you repeat that last one, please?
Sure. The number 4 is make all board committee appointments, and here's the addition: determined in agreement with board officers, vice president, and secretary. So it's a little more collaborative.
Yeah.
Um,
If I could just clarify for this board, for the last 2 years, it's been discussed with officers. It's just that this is the recommendation to make it official. These types of decisions are difficult to do for kind of one officer to do, because you do need that other person, whether it be your VP or secretary, whoever's usually readily available, to kind of assist you in those decision makings. It's just a recommendation that you're putting heads together. It's the same as setting the agenda. You know, there's people that believe, if I may just speak to this for a moment, that it's up to the president to set agendas only. But we have found in the last several years of being more collaborative, that it is much more efficient and effective to have two heads together instead of just one. You seem to be more full, encompassing, I guess is the word, to make sure you're catching everything. There's a lot going on now that wasn't going on 10 or 20 years ago in the community. So while it's different to have it set in policy or set in recommendation, I'm not sure it's different in practice.
So
okay,
I
thank
guess
you.
A question that I have with this, it says determine an agreement with board officers, vice president, secretary. What if an agreement cannot be reached? How would we, tackle an issue like that if an agreement cannot be reached by the officers? Would it be better to change, get rid of agreement with, determine
Consultation?
collaboration with board officers?
Yeah, that would work.
Yeah, I can do that. Can add that in there instead of agreement, collaboration. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it really does, it falls back, the idea is that it does fall back to the president, kind of as that final, that they're the ones who make the appointment. That it's really just in that like consultative, collaborative way that, somewhere there maybe another thought might be generated. Okay, are we good with that one if we change it to collaboration?
Yeah.
Okay. Then number 6, this is just, president has to represent the board on other boards or agencies. And then that just says unless otherwise delegated to board officers. So it's just an addition to that to allow for delegation. Nothing, okay. I'll move on to 12. It says serve as or appoint a board officer as the board's official spokesperson to the media and stakeholders. So the appointment is the addition in case.
Well, and also the addition to stakeholders, which
At the end, yeah.
we still will want to discuss in more detail, but the idea that if the board president wants someone else to be the spokesperson, they can appoint someone, but it's not just to the media, it's also to the stakeholders.
Right. So for example, I'm just trying to think of an example. While the president might be the spokesperson to the media, the president might ask the vice president to send a message, after the first day to the teachers. So that's one of the stakeholders.
All right. I think might not be a bad idea just to briefly pause right there and just get anyone's, is everyone okay with this, with these language changes or these policy changes for the responsibilities of the president? Any questions?
The only thing I have so far is really at the very beginning. I think we need to discuss the length of the term. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the 2-year term.
I think that's a great point, Mr. McNally. I think it might be best that we go through everything else and then maybe just as a whole we discuss the length of the term, because I do know there might be some disagreements there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, as for the other language changes, it doesn't sound like there's anything terribly substantive changing in practice.
Yep. I was just going to recommend, Mr. Bryant, that Mrs. Barker and some of these and/or representatives, we might want to put and/or. I'm not sure if we put and/or. I think we put and, just because to the nature of each president, they will want to do things individually, I guess. Everyone's going to want to act differently. And so you might have someone who's in a presidential role that will want to do, may want to do every single possible responsibility themselves, or may want to delegate some or all. So I just want to give each subsequent board the flexibility to have that and or in the policy language without having to change it.
Where are you looking at?
So the last one that you just read, that
Okay.
it
Okay,
said
last
and to or designee, anything that's a designee, I would say and or designee, just to give them that flexibility for that language.
And that appointment already has the or, it's the media and stakeholders, so and or stakeholders.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ms.
It
McKay.
seems to me the language that's in the red does allow for that flexibility already. But I may be missing where you're looking, so.
I think, yeah, at so if you go to number 12 all the way to the end where it says media and then it says and stakeholders, I'm just adding media and or. So I'm just adding or so that you can split it. I guess you can split it up. That's what,
Yeah,
to
all right.
Carolyn's point.
I guess I parsed that as just meaning.
Yeah, my example was kind of splitting it up,
Yeah,
but then I'll make the language say that.
okay.
Thank you.
And Ms. McCabe, do you want to take vice president?
For the vice president, we are adding additional duties to the vice president that aren't in the current policy, but really reflect what we've already stated up with the president. So it also says a 2-year term. And then it goes, the duties of the vice president are to meet with the president and the superintendent, to assist in setting the agenda, review all committee appointments. And there, Mrs. Barker, you might want to put in collaboration with the president, and serve as the board's official spokesperson as appointed for both the media and or the stakeholders, either temporarily as or permanent. And then the next line is that there will be a special election for the board to fill the vacancy of the vice presidency. And Mr. Moore, if I recall, when we went over this, the law requires the vice president to be the president, so that we could not have a special election if the president no longer serves. It will automatically be the vice president. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. Yeah.
So let me just ask. So the special election to fill the vacancy of the vice president, that one's not new. That one probably shouldn't
I think we
be in
just
red.
I think we just wrote it in a different format, but the meaning is not new.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I was like, wait a minute, that's what it says there, okay.
Yeah.
But that's what we we do anyway.
Yes.
Any questions on any of these changes for the vice president? All right, go on to the secretary then. And again, right at the top, there's a change from 1 year to 2 year. We'll discuss that, I think, at the end, once we're finished up going over everything else. I think it might be best to discuss that all as one. So would Mrs. McCabe or Mrs. Barker like to briefly discuss some of the changes to the secretary?
Yeah, I'll grab the secretary, and Mrs. McCabe, if you want to grab the recording secretary after that.
Mhm.
So there's 3 items that were pulled out, and they were either put in the recording secretary or the treasurer. So you can see that that's 2, 6, and 7, because those things are done by those particular positions anyway. And then what was added is number 10 at the end, which would adjust the numbers then, but serve as the board's official spokesperson as appointed or either temporary as permanently assigned. And that's the same thing that was added to the vice president. So you're serving as a spokesperson. And I'll put or in there. So that if the president decides to appoint for a particular item or items, both of those positions can do that.
Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. There is a paragraph below the numbered list, and the paragraph it was added any board meeting. So the word board was added. It said any meeting. So if the secretary is not able to or refuses to perform the duties of the office, and really that's for the board meeting, our regular meetings rather than a committee meeting.
Mrs. McCabe, do you want to go over the recording secretary then? And
Yes.
then
So the recording secretary, the number 1, right now it says assist the secretary by taking the minutes for all open board meetings. Mrs. Barker and I had a discussion about closed session that I'm going to speak for myself. I believe that the recording secretary should be there for closed session minutes as well. So we put that in parentheses because we had differing opinions on that. Then we took the items that were in the secretary's job and moved them down to the recording secretary. So that's what number 4 and number 5 are. That way, then when a secretary is elected, she or he does not have to delegate. It's already been done. And then we added that the vacancy would be, if there was a vacancy in the recording secretary office, the board would fill it by appointment.
So number 1, it seemed like the two of you had some differing opinions on that one. I don't know if anyone else wants to share their thoughts on that. Should it be included in policy here, or should it not be?
If are you referencing the recording secretary being in the closed session?
Correct.
Yeah. Honestly, I kind of struggled with this one myself, kind of back and forth. But the one thing that kind of comes to me is that the recording secretary is one of the people who is not part of the board itself, and not being part of the board itself, not being an elected person, has no real, I guess, political stake, and so might be a more objective person to be in that meeting for recording minutes.
Call from Listen.
Okay, thank you.
And I do want to clarify, it wasn't that I didn't think that the recording secretary should be in closed sessions. Obviously, we have recording secretary in all of our sessions. I just wanted to leave room for time that, a board may, we put this in policy, that a board may want to have just the board members there. There may be those times that may come up. So it's just something to think about.
I'd like to weigh in if that's okay. I think, my personal sense is that I think you need to give the option for the board to excuse the recording secretary during a closed session. It should be the closed session of a sensitive nature for personnel review. I think that's something that is, or student case, or there has to be exceptions in case it's a sensitive nature. And so I just think there has to be some flexibility, and if the wording reflects the sense of the sensitivity, I think it's fine. If it's a must and albeit, then I'm not comfortable with that. Again, closed session in particular can be very gray. And so I think it has to be just a flexible area.
I'm going to respectfully disagree, mainly because of the Open Meetings Act. I believe we need to have someone there who's going to make sure we stay on task on the exception. And I think that's clearly all school boards need that objective ear. I believe if we had a recording secretary who did not follow confidentiality rules, then that person could be dismissed. That isn't what we need. And so I also believe that whenever anyone takes minutes, it is very difficult to participate. And if the secretary is responsible for taking the minutes, that secretary may not be able to join the discussion because they have to be paying attention to what's going on in the meeting.
Well, in closed session, they're recorded, so that isn't, necessarily like you're typing the whole thing. But I will say, I personally believe that the board members should keep themselves on task and each
I would
other.
agree, but that isn't always what happens.
Well,
I would like to.
I think it's a matter
so-
not so much of the board members keeping
Mr.
themselves on task. I think what Mrs. McCabe is saying is kind of alluding to what I was mentioning is it's difficult when you're part of this, first of all, the objectivity, but second of all, and I think what she was more referring to is being able to be part of the discussion when you're supposed to be recording the discussion or recording the pertinent parts of the discussion.
Thank you.
If I could.
Ms.
if-
Fairgrave, you want to jump in here?
Yes, thank you. Just my view very quickly, I think there needs to be some flexibility in that item to allow for us to have a closed session topic without the recording secretary, specifically in the case of like a personnel evaluation. So however we want to word that, I just think there needs to be some flexibility depending on the topic at hand.
Again, I'm going to disagree. I may still vote for the policy, but I want it noted that I really believe we have to have the recording secretary in our closed sessions. If we are talking about an issue that is so delicate, then even more so, we need someone who's going to be sure that we're staying for the exemption, and that we're in exception, I think it is, and that we are following the rules as a board. So I'm doing it mainly to protect us from, or maybe it isn't us, it's the next board or the board down the way who may not have the same experience with OMA. So that I'm just stating that's where I land right now.
So I have a question actually regarding that because OMA has been brought up. And so I guess the next question I have is what would we need to get a legal opinion on that? Because I know that's been the practice and I don't know for what legal basis. I know it's been the practice since I've been on the board that the recording secretary was.
I'm going to jump in here because I've had my hand up for about 3 minutes. We do not need to get a legal opinion because I will tell you that our other colleagues in boards do not keep a recording secretary in any of their closed sessions. And that is actually for legal protection for that particular employee. So if you actually talk to Franzik in particular, who's a very valued attorney out there, they would tell you that they would recommend not putting the recording secretary in the meeting. Now,
So are you talking about other school boards or other boards of
other school boards?
Okay.
203, 204, 200, 220, U46, they don't keep a recording secretary in there. So that being said, I appreciate everyone's concern about keeping tasks on the topic because all boards can drift off topic. And that way I think that's the flexibility that's important. But I will tell you, if you talk to an attorney, they would tell you the less people enclosed, the better, due to protection laws. So I'm sure Dr. Pearson could speak to Hodges and ask his opinion, but I already do know the answer to that because we have talked about this extensively for the last year at our president's meetings about closed session. So I just wanted to jump in there. I was going to give that piece of advice earlier, but I couldn't get in a word. So
Ms. Weibel, sorry, I can't see when people raise their hands. So
no word. I'm sorry. I thought I'd try to use that tactic, but
yeah.
No
No,
worries.
I don't think that typically is working. So on that note, I do have a quick question then. If the minutes then would then revert to the secretary of the meeting, of the board, I should say, as opposed to the recording secretary for closed session, that would kind of add to the duties of the secretary in that I don't think that it's reasonable to ask somebody who's an equal partner elected board member to be taking the time during the meeting. So they would then have to, in order to fully participate, they would have to go back later and listen to the minutes in order or listen to the meeting in order to take minutes.
Which but that's how the policy is written now and what's supposed to be done. We're just inviting the recording secretary in, which is fine, which is kind of why we wanted to add something in there to say, hey, we can have the recording secretary in closed session, but also have the leeway. I mean, the reality is they are taped.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just listening and typing. And then it's sending it to whoever the recording secretary is.
Right.
Mr. Moore, looked like you had your hand up. You wanted to add something, or you wanted to say something?
I don't want to add to the conversation. That's certainly not my role, but I can suggest some language that might get to what you're saying.
Please do.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so number one, assist the secretary by taking the minutes for all open board meetings and closed sessions upon request.
I like that. I think that's a nice compromise. Any objections to that language?
Actually, I would call it in closed session upon request of the secretary, because the recording secretary is doing the formal work that belongs to the secretary.
So the secretary then would be delegating to the recording secretary as the president might delegate other duties.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Again, I'm going to object, but I'm one of 7, so I'm just putting my 2 cents in.
Mr. McNally, are you okay with that language?
I'm okay with that. It does address, again, as long as we have the option or the opportunity for the secretary to be able to listen to minutes and take minutes outside of the scope of the meeting itself by listening to minutes later. That was probably my big concern. There are other objectivity concerns, but I think that's something that we'll be addressing as the time comes. So I'm okay with it.
Thank you. Mrs. Barker?
I think Mrs. McCabe, did you finish the recording secretary or did we only get so far?
Nope.
Okay.
No,
But he's asking you if you're good with
are
that.
you okay with
Yes,
that?
I'm good. Yes, I'm good with that.
Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Yes, I'm good with that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Mrs. McCabe, would you like to continue then with the recording secretary?
That's it. I mean, 4 and 5 are just taking the positions from that were under the secretary's job, and that if the recording secretary becomes vacant, that position becomes vacant, then it will be filled by appointment.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then it looks like there's only one change to the treasurer. Just it looks like one number is added, number 6. Arrange a public inspection of the budget before adoption.
And that comes from, again, the secretary's role was that she or he could delegate that job, and now it just puts it in the treasurer's duties.
All right, so any other questions on that then?
Nope, not from me.
Seeing none or hearing none, I think that brings us to our last issue that needs to be discussed, and that's deciding if we want to change the terms of these officers from 1 year to 2 years. And again, this is something that has been brought up numerous times. We've discussed it a bit here and there, but again, I think finally we're going to make a decision on this and take it one direction over the other. So I don't know if anyone would like to share their opinions, their thoughts.
Mr. Bryan, I'd like to start, if you would, just to give people the historical, and Mr. McNally, you know the historical on it. So,
yeah.
Unfortunately, Mr. Manheim can't join us. The historical on this was at about 15 years ago. This was actually changed from 2 years to 1 from the current board that sat there due to their own personal reasons. I think it makes sense personally to reinstate the 2 years. It is very typical for school boards to have a 2-year term. If you speak to ISB or any of the looted districts, most of them do have 2 years. There are a few exceptions, but it's just a very typical 2-year. We also shared our personal experience, Mr. Manheim and I, that when we were president, and he obviously currently is, it does take a little while to kind of get up and running, and that you do tend to get a groove after like 4 to 6 months, and then you're rolling on to the end of your term. So it just makes sense just to do 2 years, but that's my opinion, both personally as well as historically. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Weibel. Does anyone else like to share their thoughts?
I would like to jump in on that. So I don't disagree that it does take a bit of time to get up and running on the job itself. But that does give time then for people to determine whether or not the job you're doing is sufficient. And at the end of that additional 6 to 8 or so months, once you've kind of gotten into that groove, I think the assent of the board should be what determines whether or not you would remain for 2 years. For me, I'm always, I prefer, we talk a lot about flexibility, and that removes flexibility should there be an issue with the president of the board at the end of a 1 year in a 2-year term. Should there be an issue, I think, and I would imagine that in many cases, and in fact, since I've been paying attention to the board has oftentimes just essentially renewed that position of president, for a second term or a second year in any event. I just think that we should have the flexibility to do so, not just because for that reason, but because we're representing the public, and the public doesn't get a say. And so I think we have to be kind of keeping our ears to the ground to hear what the public thinks. And if they would like to see that change, I think our board votes should reflect that as well.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Mrs. McCabe, would you like to jump in here?
I'm really on the fence with this. I kind of tend to lean more to the 1 year. But one of the things that we did with the competencies was that who you elect should have the skills to do the job. We do not talk as a board prior to an election in public about the people who are going to lead the board. We do politicking, and we do things that can be kind of a problem for the board as a whole. So on that hand, only having an election once every 2 years would stop some of that. But I'm not sure that as a group of people who are, who should be working as a team, that we've figured out how to do this kind of election based on skills. We don't really have that kind of conversation in public. We may do it individually. We're not doing it in closed session. So I tend to lean towards the 1 year, because I think we have some work to do in that area.
Thank you very much, Mrs. McCabe. Mrs. Fairgrave, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I definitely would be in support of 1 year. Just to not to completely reiterate comments that were made earlier, but the things that stick out that I would agree with. I like the flexibility. I also think that if the officer has, met or exceeded the expectations of what's needed for the role, then I think it's an easy, it would be an easy decision for the board to make to extend that individual for another 1 year term. So that's where I stand on that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Parker.
I see the benefit to each one, and I see both sides of the fence. So say, as Mrs. McCabe said, the only thing that keeps coming up is when I'm hearing with the 1 year, it's really an assumption of that what if it's not working out with that president? So I guess I don't know that that's where I would fall. I do think that, if it's not being supported here in the committee, then, in the committee it stays. So, and it sounds as though I think I'm the last one to speak about it, besides Mr. Mannheim, who's not here. So
I haven't spoken about it yet.
Mr. Bryant as well, of course.
you did.
He does get to talk.
Sorry, Mr. Bryant.
The great thing about being the chair here, I get to hear everyone else's opinions. So Ms. Barker, sorry, just to kind of go back, are you in favor of the 2 year, or would you like to stick with the 1? Sorry, I didn't get it.
I'm in favor. I guess I can say I'm in favor of the 2 year. I can see where it would be difficult once you got going. I haven't been in the role of president. I'm listening to the people who have been in the role of president, and hearing that that's kind of, it's challenging once you really get your feet under you, and now it's pretty much over. And that's a big role to fill. So I could see the benefit of the 2 year.
Thank you. All right. So I guess I'll share my thoughts here, and I think I could echo what has already been said. There are pros and cons to each determination here. For me, as I'm looking at this, there are the benefits of the 2 year. There's that continuity that's important. There's that politicking isn't happening. But just us as a board doesn't seem like we're set in stone, or we can't determine as a group of 7 or even 6 one way or the other. So for me, I think at this point it's probably best to keep it at 1 year, because you do have that option. We do have that option to go for that 2nd year, 3rd year, and we can do it year by year instead of locking somebody in for 2 years if that's not something that many of the board members want. So for me personally, I think right now sticking with the 1 year is probably best for me. So I think just
be curious to see what Mr. Mannheim says.
Wait.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bryan, sorry, I'm counting heads. We do have a majority. I apologize. So Here's what I will say as a matter of caution, just to this board, as time goes on in your future, I would be very cautious about the politicking that has gone on. My experience with being on this board for 4 years is that I have seen people both on this board and the previous board who sit their entire role in their chair politicking all year long for a position. It is not effective. You do not get work done, and you are not achieving the goals of the board when you're doing that. So my suggestion is, if you're going to stick with the 1 year, you really figure out a way to police yourself as a board, to make sure that you stay focused on the goals at hand and not on who's going to wear what hat and what role. What I've seen is not good, and not admirable. So I do think that this board, as the boards morph and mature, hopefully we'll get better with that. But I really think it's a very big job, much bigger than people really have any idea. And until you're sitting in that role, you really won't get it. But I think politicking all year is a very non-productive way of being a board member.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Weibel.
So, and there's just
So-
one other, if I could just add one other
Yeah,
quick
go ahead,
thing.
Mr. McNally.
Should we ever consider a 2-year, the one thing that I would, and again, I'm opposed to it because a 1 year turns into a year, 2 year based upon assent of the board very easily. But should we ever consider a 2 year, the one thing I would also add is that that should not, the first year of those terms should not be also the first, it should not be an election year. In other words, so that nobody's put in that position of coming in and they're voting for, if that's one of the concerns, it certainly would have to be attended to in a manner that we'd have to consider. They should have a voice in that, but they're also being kind of thrust into a role. So that should be part of the discussion. And I'm not saying one way or the other it should be, but it should be part of the discussion.
For those that are here in the fall of 2022, my recommendation is whoever's here, revisit it then, because you'll be rolling into your next cycle of your board, what your new board would be.
And, one more quick thing on the history of this was the reason it was done was because there were boards that felt they needed that flexibility for the 1 year term. That's why that was done. It wasn't simply for personal reasons, but because they felt that they needed to be able to address removal of a president. And rather than, it would become a very uncomfortable thing midterm to remove a president. So it's better to have them essentially reappointed by assent of the board.
I would respectfully disagree with that statement, Mr. McNally, but I appreciate the sentiment.
And just so you know, Mrs. Barker and I did talk about should a president have at least a year on the board? And we, tell me if I remember this accurately, Mrs. Barker, but it would really tie the board's hands if you have that in policy.
Yeah, we couldn't have it in policy. Mr. Moore, do you want to explain that further for us?
Yes, and I think part of this goes to what Mr. McNally was just talking about also, is that the school code mandates that a board elect officers at the first, or at the meeting where the new board is seated. So you have to do it at that meeting. You can't do it on the off year if you have a 2 year cycle. And the school code just says, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, is that the board shall elect a president from its members. So you can't adopt by policy restricting which of those members are eligible.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Is it something that we're interested in putting into the practice handbook where consider at least one year under your belt? I mean, I'll wordsmith that better, but before you're hitting the ring for president?
I would be opposed to that just because I think then you're kind of restricting the intent of the law that applies there. And I
So
don't.
we're good with that not being in there. Okay.
I'm good with that being left out. If as Mr. Moore said, and as I said, that was something that I wanted as part of the discussion, just because there is that situation where somebody's coming in, and as we've all been on the board, we don't really know, like, who should I vote for? You might have that feeling, but again, as Mr. Moore explained, that would be restrictive, and I wouldn't want any even practices that appeared to restrict that either.
All right, so I think we are good with this policy. Because Mr. Mannheim is not here, should this go on for action then at our January meeting? Or should
I personally think it should be action anyway, so that the public knows what it is we're discussing, and
Okay.
really what it is we're doing.
Yep.
Does the board want us to change it from 2-year to 1 year?
Yes.
Is that the recommendation? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
again, we had a majority here that said, let's keep it at 1. So definitely change that back to 1. Yeah. So we can do that. And then again, we'll put it on for action for January. Okay. Then that will conclude our meeting. We do have our next policy meeting. I believe it's April 19th at 5 p.m. We will typically, April is for the discipline handbook. Mr. Moore, would you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I would like to propose a
That's
meeting in February, because there is a new edition of Press Out.
Okay.
And if we perhaps do it on the same day as L&T, just like today.
Yep. I think that's excellent. If we if there's new press came out, then we can schedule something for do you know the date on that?
The 15th. I'm looking at the
15th.
calendar out the window. 16th.
16th. That is a Tuesday. So
Yeah.
February 16th. Okay, excellent. So our next policy meeting will be February the 16th at 5 p.m. Other than that, I think we are ready to adjourn at 5:58. Thank you all. And then we have L&T coming up in a moment here. I'll hand over the mic to you, Mr. McNally and Mrs. Barker.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And are we ready to go directly into the next meeting here? Board members?
Can we do like 3 to 5 minutes recess?
That's what I would recommend, because we've been talking for almost an hour, so might be a good idea.
Thanks.
Okay, it looks like we might be waiting for Mrs. Fairgrieve. So,
I'm here, thank you.
okay, I didn't want to get started. I saw no videos, so.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
If we are ready, Ms. Marsan, are you ready?
Sorry, yes, I'm ready.
Okay, all right, then if that being the case, then we can call to order the December 21st Learning and Teaching Committee meeting for Community Unit School District 303 at 6:02. And I have to read the same notice that Mr. Bryant read for his meeting. Notice is hereby given that the school board is convening this Learning and Teaching Committee meeting on December 21st, 2020. On December 11th, 2020, Governor Pritzker issued a gubernatorial disaster proclamation for all counties in the state of Illinois, Executive Order 2020-74. In consideration of this, and due to the COVID-19 health pandemic, Board President Nicholas Mannheim has determined that a fully accessible in-person meeting on December 21st, 2020 is not practical nor prudent. As permitted by Public Act 101-640, this meeting is being held without the physical presence of a quorum at the District Administration Center location. Citizens and staff may view the meeting via a live stream of the meeting by visiting the link located on the District 303 website. The recording secretary is directed to include this determination in the minutes of the meeting. No notes will be taken at this committee meeting. Each board member shall now announce his or her presence in the virtual meeting and confirm that he or she can hear the other board members. So if we can just kind of, I guess I'll go along based on what I can see here, because I can see everybody for the moment. So Mr. Bryant, can you hear?
I can hear, yes, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. McCabe, can you hear?
I can, thank you.
Mrs. Barker, can you hear?
I can hear.
All right. Mrs. Fairgrieve, can you hear?
Yes, thank you.
And Ms. Weibel, are you able to hear?
I am, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then I have to pull over to our agenda here. So first up is citizens' comments. And we do have a significant number of citizens' comments, it is my understanding. Ms. Barker, are you able to read, or I have the public comment form?
I have them.
Okay, if you're up and ready, I'd rather have you do it. Thank you.
All right, here we go. The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding these individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Okay, and Mr. Smith, I believe, will queue up and play those remarks.
Hi, my name is Connie Tweet. My son is a second grader at in 303. He goes to Davis. We've been remote learning since everything fell apart. And I just wanted the board to hear my experience with being home. I'm a stay-at-home mom with my son and my daughter. She's 4. She was not in preschool this year because it just wasn't feasible for us. So I've been home with Marty, doing his schoolwork, as best as we can. And to say that it's been easy would be a lie. It would be it's been a very hard thing for us. But we've been doing it, and it's been a struggle. But I have to say, it has been made so much better because of the support that I've gotten from not only the staff at Davis, but the remote learning staff. Marty's teacher, Megan Madigan, has been amazing with everything that's been happening, with all of the ups and downs and the, does the internet working? Why isn't it working? It works today, it doesn't work tomorrow. Dealing with, I don't know how she does it. At one point she had, I believe, 28 students in her class, her online class, and now it has dropped because some, they moved them around, but she's done amazing. She's done an amazing job. And the support I've gotten from Davis directly with, tech support and with just everything. The schools you guys are doing an amazing job. And it's still really, really hard for us, but I can't imagine how it would be if you guys weren't doing such a great job. So I really just wanted to say thank you for all the I know there's more hard work than I can imagine going on in the background. And I just, there's so much negativity in the world, and you got, 303 has been amazing for us since we've been here. So, I just wanted to say thank you, and keep up the good work. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Mark Huber. I have two stepdaughters in the district, one at Redling and one at North. I want to thank Dr. Pearson and the board members for your continued efforts to reopen the schools and acknowledge the complexities you face in trying to do so. I'm encouraged to hear that the schools will be reopening on January 5th. With the ultimate goal being a quick return to a 5-day in-person schedule, the teacher shortage needs to be remedied. We cannot reopen without teachers present. With the CARES Act ending on December 31st, it's time to hold the teachers to the language in their contract. The requirement for a hybrid model should not result in teachers being allowed to work from home. Starting January 5th, teachers should be in the physical classroom daily for a full school day in accordance with the contract language. The district has made significant investments to accommodate this. All absences should be applied to sick time, the FMLA leave, or the parental leave provisions within the contract. Truncated days, combined with the ineffectiveness of remote learning, has already put our kids significantly behind in their academic progress. We must do all we can not to send these kids forward with a large knowledge gap. And the first step is to fix this teacher problem. Teachers cannot teach from home as effectively as they can in classroom. We've spent large sums of money on OWL cameras, other technology, and a variety of PPE. Normalcy is a critical factor in effective learning. Getting teachers back in the classroom can at least provide some form of normalcy in the lesson delivery and the setting for teacher-student interactions. The policy of teacher choice, although appropriate in the early months of the pandemic, is crippling the administration in the planning process. By returning to the attendance guidelines within the contract language, administrators can eliminate staff uncertainties from the planning process and focus solely on safely returning students to the classroom. Thank you for your time.
Hello, this is Michael Trisilius. I have two kids in District 303. My son is in middle school. He has ADHD. He has an IEP program, which, virtually is not really working. Not that they're not trying, but it doesn't work with an ADHD kid. He was failing almost all his classes, 3 Fs and a D. It took $500 and 2 tutors to get him to be passing at the end of the semester. He's a very unhappy child. My daughter's in high school, a straight A student with a B here and there, is a B and C student with a D here and there. She is very, very upset. She just does not do well in the virtual setting. She's very shy, and she's a freshman in high school, and she doesn't know other kids in her classes. She's got nobody to help her. So she's doing poorly and she's very upset. All of our big medical people are now saying that it is safe for kids to go back to school and it's very detrimental to not be back in school. So we don't have that anymore. And I agree with that also. As the only other thing is, I expect my kids to be back in school in January. That's the only place they need to be. It's very detrimental to kids. My kids are both very upset, and kids have even been committing suicide at a much higher rate since this has gone on. And 1 in 4 kids actually has talked about suicide since this started. I don't know how much more that is than normal, but that's the number I heard. Anyway, I think there's no other choice. They go back to school. You know, if all you District 303 people, including teachers, can go to the grocery store and it's safe for that attendant, the cashier, to check you out, then it's safe for you people too. So that is what I'm saying. I want my kids back in school come January. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Greg Thompson, and I'm reading a letter that my daughter wrote. My name is Isabella Thompson. I'm a student, and I want to go to school full day and for 5 days a week. I understand your concerns when it comes to COVID-19, but when does the student's education become more important than what ifs? When will the student's education, mental health, and futures become the priority of this administration? Everyone knows that remote learning is failing the students, yet nobody is willing to admit it. You expect us to connect with fellow classmates and teachers, but I find that doing so is near impossible. If you decide to keep the students home after break, then I can assure you that you will completely lose any respect the students still have for your administration. School systems are about believing in education, although it is apparent that this administration believes in neglect. Thank you.
My name is Jack Moore Thompson. I am in 6th grade at Thompson. I want to go back to school because half the time the technology doesn't work, and it's hard to learn on the Chromebook. Please bring back in-person learning 5 days a week, activities, and sports. Thank you.
Michelle Casile. I'm calling about your decision to limit attendance choices and its impact on declining academics and enrollment. Families leave D303 when academics decline and have limited choice for in-person learning. Enrollment decline has not really been discussed. Total student capacity district-wide is almost 14,000 students. We currently have room for an additional 2,000 students because of low enrollment. What are you doing with all that space paid for by taxpayers? Continued enrollment decline impacts future staffing, course and program offerings, and building utilization. When are you having the staffing and building utilization conversations related to the lower enrollment projection? Stop dividing and alienating the public through your inability to govern. With bloated fund balances and space, we should have all choices available to all learners, remote and full 5-day in-person learning. What is stopping you from providing these choices? The board's priority should be making sure Dr. Pearson is held accountable for the results for all students, meaning IEP, 504, homebound, hospitalized, special ed, gifted, general ed, and everywhere in between. Every D303 student should be learning, growing, and thriving academically and mentally. Hopefully, the Students Failing Report will be a reality check that you need to address academic decline and get students back in person 5 days a week. Give them the choice. Enrollment, staffing, academic performance, and building utilization are all tied to student choice. It's the big picture. Please stop looking at each one in isolation. Your role as board members is to be fiscally responsible, to make data-driven decisions, and to hold Dr. Pearson accountable for academic and social-emotional performance and growth, and to effectively communicate with your constituents. And everything I just said should be happening at the board table. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Brad Hogan. I have a child at Davis Primary. I just wanted to call in and just voice my gratitude for everything that you guys have done to keep the kids in school as long as you were able to. Also, when it transferred over to the e-learning, the improvements that I had seen from what last year was to this year were so impressive to me, and I'm just happy to see that you guys have done such a great job of kind of staying on top of this. We're excited at the prospect of going back to school because obviously that is the ideal way for our kids to learn, but I do just want to voice again my appreciation for everybody at 303, teachers, board members, and everyone in between. So thank you very much, and that's all. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Jill Hogan, and I have a second grader at Davis Primary. I just wanted to call and express my eternal gratitude to everyone, from the incredibly selfless and talented teachers, especially Ms. Thomas, to the dedicated staff members, the amazing board members, and the entire district who have worked tirelessly throughout this entire pandemic. I felt very fortunate to have my child in District 303 before all of this happened, but even more so now. I watch how the different districts have been managing all of the mandates and restrictions, and at every turn our district has gone exceedingly above and beyond. From the teachers who have put themselves at risk for our children when they have their own families to consider, and who have adapted so quickly to finding new and innovative ways to continue to keep our children learning while keeping them safe, to the district who has not used the mandates or restrictions as an excuse, but have risen to every occasion to be flexible, forward-thinking, and resilient, which in turn has made our children, and us parents too, cultivate these skills as well. This has been an extremely difficult year for all of us, probably not for anyone more than the teachers, and I am so truly grateful for all that is being done on your end. Obviously, in-person learning is the ideal choice for all of us, as it offers benefits beyond academics, including socialization and opportunities for maturation and emotional growth that may not be available in the home. And that is why I was so thankful when our schools voiced the recognition of this and reopened in August at the first chance that it was reasonably safe to do so. I was beyond impressed with the phenomenal job that was done to keep our children safe. As much as it was disheartening to have to go back to remote in December, I know the district made that choice by taking everything into consideration and caring about our children and community as a whole. Then the teachers did an outstanding job implementing e-learning over the past 3 weeks. I know that at every single turn, the teachers, the board members, and the district have done everything in their power to do what is best for and right by our children and our families. I just want to say thank you for everything and wish you all a well-deserved, happy, and safe holiday break. We look forward to hopefully returning in-person learning in January. But regardless of what happens, just know that what all you have done and continue to do does not go unnoticed or unappreciated. Thank you so much. You are all exceptional, and I keep you in my prayers each and every night. Take care. Bye-bye.
My name is Jamie Munns. There has been a lot of noise from parent-led groups which do not represent all parents in our community. While I agree that in-person learning is preferred, the staffing challenges, especially those at the high school level due to needed training for specific courses, might not be possible. I would personally prefer that my student have trained and competent staff instructors in a remote setting, as opposed to inferior learning from less qualified subs and aides who are brought in to cover staffing gaps for in-person learning when teachers require quarantine, become ill, or simply quit. The district has carefully planned for our students to experience minimal disruption when state and county guidelines have forced us to change hybrid to fully remote learning, and it's been quite clear to me that they also prefer in-person learning when it's safe and possible. The personal attacks against those volunteering their time and effort for this community are actually embarrassing. The board are volunteers from our community. They spend countless hours away from their own families on a volunteer basis and don't deserve the abuse and slanderous accusations expressed in prior meetings. I support the board and administration in using all available guidance from IDPH and other fact-based sources to make the best decisions on in-person learning for our district. Thank you for your time.
Hello, this message is for the 12/21/20 Learning and Teaching Committee meeting. My name is Kathy McGinley. I have a junior at East High School. I am currently reading the book, Becoming Michelle Obama, who received her bachelor's degree from Princeton University and her postdoctorate degree from the prestigious Harvard Law School. She writes a lot about her childhood years growing up on the south side of Chicago and how her mom was her advocate, especially when one of her teachers couldn't control the classroom and moved her to a different class with a better teacher. She wrote, quote, "I just had the advantage of an advocate, my mother. I thought about this more often now that I was an adult, especially when people applauded me for my achievements, as if there weren't a strange and cruel randomness to it all. Through no fault of their own, those other students had lost a year of learning. I'd seen enough at this point to understand how quickly even small deficits can snowball," end quote. All of us parents are advocating for our children and want them to thrive. As I listened to Thursday's business services meeting, I was so happy for the parents and students who are thriving with remote learning. I thought, I wonder if these same parents are sad that my child is miserable and has gone from loving school to hating school. I guess they don't realize that every Sunday, the day before my daughter's 7.5-hour day of staring at a computer screen, my daughter cries because she is so dreading it. I wondered why these Thursday callers weren't advocating for my child to have a choice for in-school learning, since their child had a choice for remote learning. Ironically, one of the callers actually said, quote, "We appreciate the district allowing us parents to make a choice for our children that we feel would benefit them during these unprecedented times," end quote. I guess the "we" in her statement equals the parents whose kids love remote learning. Fact, first semester, remote choice equals 100% satisfied. In-person choice equals 5% satisfied. The kids that wanted to be in school were only in school 5% of the actual days that school was in session. As I stated before in many emails and at the October board meeting, music is a huge part of my daughter's life, and she is in both chorale and jazz choirs. Not only have I emailed, but my daughter has actually emailed the administration multiple times, speaking for the entire choir, that not only will they wear masks, but they would buy their own face shields with their own money. Everyone is confused why the Norris Cultural Arts Center can't be used like the hundreds, if not thousands, of other Illinois schools who are using their auditoriums. I was disheartened by Carol Smith's December 3rd response to my email regarding this question, which reads, quote, I shared your concerns with Mr. Richter, and he said that when the opportunity arises to resume singing in school, East will utilize the spaces it has available, including the Norris Cultural Arts Center. The space is set aside at this time for that purpose, end quote. The risk is minute that these kids' aerosols could be transmitted to each other in the Norris Cultural Arts Center. To not use this facility and deny these kids their joy of singing is literally cruel. Remember, I am my child's advocate. So, in summary, I hope you know that I recognize and I really do appreciate all of your sacrificial time you have put in during these past 9 months to try to help these children. Merry Christmas.
Hi, this is Gina Panic. I have 2 children at St. Charles East High School. I'm calling about getting these children back in school. There's no reason why they should not be in school. All these other people in the world are working, and there's no reason why these kids should not be able to attend school with their teachers and their staff. If the school is worried about liability, you should have parents sign a waiver so our kids can actually attend school. We did take a survey at the beginning of the school year, but apparently it was completely ignored, even though it was up to 85% of parents wanted their children back in school. The parents were aware of the liability at that time. I just don't see what the point is and why this is becoming such a horrible issue. If you're really concerned about our children, you would have them in school. They need to be social. They need to learn in person, and they need to have a regular school life. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dana Reedy, and I have a first grader at Wasco Elementary. I am requesting an update to see if we can get back to the full 5-day schedule, the regular schedule from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. That would be, I know, appreciated for a lot of parents that are in our area. So I'm just looking for if that's a possibility in the next year, the 2021. Again, if you have anything, I would really appreciate it. 630.
Hi there, my name is Allison Renane, and I have 2 high school students that have been doing the hybrid model this past year. While I appreciate the effort that the administration put into getting our kids in school by implementing the current hybrid model, I do believe it is severely flawed. I think that the teachers are doing the best that they can with this model, but I don't believe it is the best that our district can offer to our students at this time. The current model only allows for the high school students to be in the building 2 half-days a week, which is about 20% of the time, and not the full 50% as promised over the summer. One flaw with the current model is that students often choose to stay home on one of their in-person days, knowing that they may only have 1 or 2 teachers in person that day out of all 4 classes. If students have a study hall and or have 1 or 2 remote-only teachers that day, then what's the motivation to come for just 1 in-person class? If the students had a full day with all 8 periods, having only 1 or 2 remotely taught classes, this would be much more motivating to come in person. The second flaw is that is testing while students are hybrid. When teachers give exams, the in-person students take the test or quiz in class with supervision, while the students at home are not supervised, and thus given the ability to use notes or their phones to assist in finding answers. While none of us condone this cheating per se, this is definitely not equitable. Either all students should be required to take tests in person, or all students should be allowed to take tests with the ability to use their notes or Google, etc., from wherever location they are taking the test. Since it seems that most tests are falling on Fridays, students who fall in the second half of the alphabet are now at a disadvantage. They are discouraged to come to school on testing days. Why not just stay at home, take the test from their house in order to use the notes like the first half of the alphabet? The current model is neither motivating to students nor does it offer a consistent high school schedule from 7 to 2:30. I think that the current hybrid model was a Band-Aid for the 1 month that we had in-person learning. However, going forward, I truly hope that the administration will take a look at the current model and recognize that it is not the best option for second semester. I truly hope that you consider changing the plan to a full 50% hybrid model that our students deserve. Please restore our in-person activities, sports, and lunch for our high school students. Thank you very much and have a happy holiday.
Hi, my name is Peter Pluska. We have 4 kids in our family attend the school district, ranging from 2nd grade to 2 in high school. For the first thing we want to comment, we appreciate all the teachers' efforts in these trying times. Our kids appreciate it as well. But we would like to get our kids back to school. They would like to be back at school. The data supports that. We would like to follow the CDC recommendation of kids being back at school. They would like to be successful in their schoolings. All the data supports that. There's extensive data that remote learning is a negative impact on them, and we would like to proceed and get full day, 5 days school for our kids again. Thank you. Bye.
My name is Lisa Katashuk, and I'm a freshman in high school. The students of District D303 demand that you open schools for full-time in-person learning. Before we were remote full-time, we would go to school 2 out of 5 days a week. That is only 40% of the original 50% you promised. Students are depressed and unhappy with the current schedule, and we feel imprisoned in our own homes. It is unacceptable to bar us from interaction with our teachers in this way. I'm a freshman, and I've only had around a couple of weeks' worth of school. When we only went in person for 2 out of 5 days, I would leave school feeling good, but not satisfied. I felt like I needed more time with my teachers to fully grasp the concepts we were learning. If we went in person 5 days a week, I can guarantee that students will be happier and our grades will be higher. As a student, I demand that you open the schools for in-person learning 5 days a week.
Hello, my name is Marina Schusterman. I have 2 children in the North High School. I am very disappointed with our school board, our district administration, and the way you have been handling our high school students' education for the last 9 months. Our kids are not allowed to be at school. They're not allowed to get all classes every day. They're not allowed to get full instructional time for all the classes. What do you think are the consequences of all of that? We all know that and understand that COVID-19 does not have a 90% death rate. It has a survival rate of 99.6%. If you are relatively young and healthy, your odds of dying are virtually 0. We know that the number of deaths in 2020 is in the exact same range as 2019 and 2018 and every other year in the past decade. We know that the deaths from cancer, heart disease, and even the flu and pneumonia are dramatically down. Even gunshot murder victims and car accident deaths are being classified as COVID across the country. We are the community of D303 parents also know that your decisions towards the high school children dramatically increased depression, drug and alcohol abuse, poor learning retention, food insecurity, anxiety, irrational fears, irregular sleep patterns, lack of motivation, inability to focus, video game or porn addiction, poor hygiene, obesity, vision impairment, abuse or violence in the home. We are the community of D303 has been trying to be understanding and supportive of your baseless actions towards the high school children, but enough is enough. Our kids deserve to be at school 5 days a week for the full instructional time, for the same time that you get paid for. You often give us an example of other school districts and their inability to have in-person learning, but you fail to mention, for some reason, that there are plenty of examples of other school districts all over the country who have in-person 5 days a week instruction. Somehow, all the private schools can stay open for the entire week with full instructional time, where the parents of D303 do not care for bad examples. We want the good examples and we want the best education for our children. That's why we choose to live in the area and pay high property taxes. Please provide us a detailed plan on when and how our children can get back to their high school learning full time. Thank you.
Hello, this is Mr. Carey. I have 2 children who were supposed to attend North High School this last fall. However, the school board decided to close the school to anyone suspected of having the coronavirus. Something as common as grass on the ground, and forced us to homeschool. Segregating our children on the basis of virology is a violation of the 14th Amendment, as offensive as racial segregation was in the 1950s or HIV status in the 90s. We made the mistake over the last decade of moving to the District 303 area for the schools, which had some of the highest ratings in the state and now have steadily dropped in a race to the bottom due to our current board. We drove by the North High School often thinking of a day when our children would attend this expansive campus, only to have a terrorist school board shut it down, serving the will of billionaires and their foundations who anxiously seek to destroy public education and the teachers' unions forever. You must reopen the schools full-time as dictated in the Illinois Constitution, and let those who want to live in fear of a flu with the 99.99 survival rate homeschool in their basements. Have you forgotten 2017 when St. Charles East had an outbreak of the novavirus? They shut it down for 2 days, cleaned the school, and reopened it once again for all. Thanks for your time.
That concludes public comment.
All right, so we had 17 public speakers. Next up, we have Superintendent update. Dr. Pearson, do you have an update?
Yeah, so we are going to be talking about the high school plan for second semester tonight. So that's going to be a majority of my update. I did want to mention that we did have the first day of holiday meal collection today, and it went really well. Just as a reminder, over the break, if you are picking up meals, we are only doing it on Mondays. So today was this week, and then we'll do again next Monday. We'll resume our normal schedule after the break, which is Monday to Thursday. But for the holiday break, it's just on Monday.
Thank you. All right, any other, does that conclude, or is there more?
That's all. Yep. Thank you, Mr. McNally.
Oh, thank you. All right, next up is welcome celebrations recognitions. I'm not sure if we have any. Dr. Herman, do we have any?
No, we do not have any for this evening's meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I guess we'll move on to our discussion items. First item for discussion is the high school schedule for semester 2.
Great.
Hello, my name is Mark Moore. I'm Assistant Superintendent. With me today presenting are Audra Christensen, Principal at St. Charles North, and Jim Richter, Principal at St. Charles East. And we are here to present a recommended high school schedule for second semester. Before we get to the schedule, we're going to review the health and safety guidelines and constraints provided to us by the State Board of Education and the State Department of Public Health. First, no groups larger than 50 people in any space are allowed at any time, and this includes the large spaces such as the cafeteria, auditoriums, and gyms. All individuals must maintain physical distance of at least 6 feet throughout the campus, and in classrooms, to allow this distancing to occur, student desks must be at least 6 feet apart. These requirements significantly constrain us on the number of students that we can have in a class at any time, well less than the number we would typically have in a class. Of course, continuing is the requirement that all individuals wear masks covering their mouth and nose at all times. A few other details that we have implemented are that we do not use lockers and we do not allow congregating in the halls to ensure the physical distancing occurs. Eating is not allowed during class time, but drinks are, and students or staff who need to eat must do so in designated areas outside of class time. Confirming again, local school districts are required to follow the state board guidance. Trying to have school for all students every day is simply not possible. There is not enough space in any middle school or high school to allow that to happen. And also, to reference some questions that were presented at a prior board meeting, the State Board and the Department of Public Health have a community transmission metric, which is a case positivity rate of 8% or greater than 100 cases per 100,000 per week. Those numbers are based upon county-wide public rates and are not related to school cases. Kane County has been well over 8% since mid-October, and that appears to be continuing. Finally, before we get into the changes, just wanted to update you on the remote student counts. In July, when we surveyed families, about 13% of our high school students chose to be fully remote. When we resurveyed in September, prior to the start of in-person education, we were at about 20% fully remote. And now as we enter January, right at 1/3 of our students have declared that they prefer the fully remote model.
We will next share about recommended changes to the current schedule to be implemented starting January 19th. Extended learning time will include 2 40-minute sessions assigned by class period Tuesday through Friday. While students may still access this time with their teachers virtually, students will also have the opportunity to attend this time in person. To support this in-person extended learning opportunity while also maintaining health and safety requirements, a pass system will be implemented. To remove transportation as an access barrier, bus service will run a second time at 2:40. Since the implementation of extended learning time, students have benefited from the dedicated time in a multitude of ways, which include but are not limited to the opportunity for individualized instruction and support, the time to connect with teachers, and having the opportunity to engage in content or specific coursework. The next 3 slides will provide examples of these benefits.
I would like to start by sharing an example from a social studies teacher. They state, modern American history utilizes this time as learning extension and provides additional supports for students. For learning extension, there is time to show videos and use podcasts. These are items that may be longer and cannot be shown during a regularly scheduled class time. Much of modern American history's primary sources are visual and documented through film and audio. Students can have the opportunity to come to the extension office hours to view or listen to these documents and have an in-depth discussion on them. This creates a better understanding of the curriculum and an extension of their learning. Similarly, this time is also used for support or intervention in modern American history by using the time for a revision party. Students from all levels of classes come together and are able to work with more than one teacher, regardless if they have that teacher or not. There is an advantage for others to read written work that they may not be used to. It is also a time where the teacher can reteach historical analysis writing skills specific to the students who need it most. The next example comes from a special education teacher. They state, another example of the extended learning benefits is within special education. Case managers meet with students on their caseload in order to progress monitor IEP goals or work on supporting executive functioning skills. This includes, but is not limited to, reviewing grades and developing a plan together to problem solve academic or functional obstacles. As annual reviews occur throughout the year, case managers also use this time to prepare the students for the meeting and work on their post-secondary plan. Our final example comes from an AP English teacher. They state, the extended learning opportunities in the high school model do so much more than allow for struggling students to have extended time and access to their teachers. It allows for greater one-to-one connections and work with all populations of students. This is particularly true in a workshop model class, such as creative writing and literature, AP seminar, AP research, VEI, or incubator. As an AP research teacher, this time is invaluable as it allows for 30 minutes plus with individual students to build rapport and depth of understanding of their individualized research projects. It allows time to ask Socratic questions that extend student thinking and offers real-time authentic assessment and feedback. The last question I always ask my students when exiting this extended time is, how has this conversation shifted or helped your thinking on your project? 100% of my students are able to respond in affirming and positive next step ways and keeps them moving forward with their year-long research projects. Without this extended learning time, those conversations would be truncated to at the most 10 minutes. Individualized extension of learning drives the soft skills, SEL connection, and critical thinking that is an essential part of my course and many other courses.
And now we will share the bell schedule and calendar for our newly proposed schedule. And as we communicated previously, this would start on January 19th, not on January 5th. First, the bell schedule. We maintain the odds and evens blocks plan. So on odd days, periods 1, 3, 5, and 7 meet, and on even days, periods 2, 4, 6, and 8 meet. The change from the schedule we used previously is that the blocks are now 75 minutes long instead of 70 minutes long. The other major change, which you don't see here, is that there is no remote Monday anymore. So after January 19th, every day is an attendance day for some group of students, as you'll see on the calendar on the next page. After the class period blocks end at 12:35, there's a break for lunch for students who are remaining on campus and for staff. And then our extended learning sessions begin. They run in 2 40-minute blocks. One is from 1:10 to 1:50, and the other is from 1:50 to 2:30. As Mrs. Christensen explained earlier, we're able to run the buses twice on these days. So there will be a run at 12:45 after the blocks in the morning for students who are not staying, and then again at 2:40 Tuesday through Friday for students who need a ride after the extended learning sessions. As I mentioned on the last slide, we are no longer going to have a remote Monday. So the 4-day cycle of in-person, odd even for Group A and odd even for Group B just continues. So for example, starting on the 19th of January, we start with a odd day. The Group A students appear in person, the Group B students attend class remotely, and the remote students, of course, attend class remotely. The same group comes to school on the next day, the 20th, for their even periods. And then on Thursday and Friday, Group B comes in person, and Group A and Group R, remote, attend remotely. You'll notice then on Monday, the 25th of January, we start repeating the cycle. So Group A attends odds, then Group A attends evens, Group B attends odds, and then Group B attends evens. And on the 5th day, the cycle starts over. You'll also notice specific periods scheduled for the extended learning opportunities. So for example, on Tuesday the 19th, it will be periods 2 and then 4. And on the 20th, it'll be periods 5 and then 1. Over the course of the 2 weeks, each period meets twice. Finally, you'll see there are no extended learning periods on Monday, as we don't have that time scheduled on Mondays. So just to summarize the major changes from the schedule we used in October, November, and this schedule is the removal of remote Mondays, the addition of 5 minutes to each block class on every day, and the changing of the model for extended learning periods in the afternoon to allow for in-person attendance during that time. We thank you for watching our presentation, and at the meeting, we are welcome to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So having heard that, I am sure that we probably have some discussion from board members. So is anybody, it looks like Ms. Parker would like to begin.
Yeah, I'm Mr. McNeely. I have 7 questions, so I might as well just get this party started.
Get them going.
Before I begin with the questions, though, I do want to say I am thankful there is no more synchronous online Monday. I think that's fantastic. There's a couple other things I heard that I really liked. I like the addition of the time per class period. I think that's crucial. And I do like these after these extended learning sessions, but I do obviously have some questions. The first one is, we heard several times about students being told that they're not getting the full curriculum, especially in the high schools. Do you believe this schedule will ensure that we'll do just that? We'll cover the complete curriculum, which is a priority of the Board of Education.
I'm going to let Dr. Herman speak to the curriculum piece. As you know, back in the fall, we actually identified priority standards in the curriculum in each area, but she can speak to that a little bit.
Yes, I would agree with what Dr. Pearson just said about the PLCs having time to identify priority standards and to align each of their units and their daily lessons to those. I think that all teachers would agree there has been a slight reduction in content, but not a reduction in the work that students are doing towards the essential standards.
Okay, and is that the case with, I guess a concern would be then our AP classes. Are they using the pacing guides to catch up for what they missed first semester?
The AP classes, yes, are working, they're networking with their AP colleagues across the United States to make sure that they are on target. I know that some teachers are holding additional opportunities for students to go deeper into the content beyond even office hours. But yes, our teachers, our PLCs of our AP courses are doing their absolute best to make sure that students are on target to be prepared for the exams.
Okay. So during the presentation, it was mentioned that students will be able to attend in person in the afternoon via a pass system. I saw examples of what the pass system can be used for, but could you explain more fully about the pass system? I feel like I wasn't quite clear if you're saying that students will have to get a special pass to attend, or that students may attend until 2:40 unless they have a pass to leave at 12:45. So could that be clarified, please?
I'm going to let Mr. Moore talk about that with you.
Our thinking there is that you would have a pass to attend a class so that we're ensured that each classroom where students may need to go doesn't exceed the capacity of that space. Because under the COVID rules, as you know, we're significantly limited on the number of people that can be in any one location. We have identified some software we can use to do that, as opposed to going to a teacher and getting a sheet of paper. We're working through that. The demo that I've seen on the software, it's pretty slick and really easy to use.
Okay, I would definitely like to know a little bit more about it, because I envision a system where we have students who really should be staying, and you know, we love those students dearly. I may have some of those students in my house, but because there's a 12:45 bus that takes me home to the things I want to eat and the games I want to play and the phone that I have, I'm going to go home, and I'm not going to necessarily make the mature choice. Because I'm a teenager, and sometimes how do we work around that?
So there's two parts. I think when we think of pass first, it's students asking to come to help, which of course is one of the methods, but teachers can also tell a child or a student, I expect you to come. North High School has had a tutorial system during regular times for many years. And they do use that dual mode. So some students go to certain classes based on their own need or their desire. And on the other side, teachers go to students and say, I need you to come to my class.
And
I'm sorry, I wanted to jump in on this because we have a somewhat similar program where I teach. And that was a concern that I had expressed earlier, was would teachers be, and that's one of my questions as well, would teachers be able to require students who needed certain remediations? And it sounds like that's the case, which is what we're able to do as well. And the caveat on this is that parents need to be aware that the student may be required. So this is actually part of their learning time. And so that's one of the things I think it's incumbent upon the parents of students to know, that the learning time doesn't end at 12:45 just because that's when the first bus comes.
Yeah, so I think it'd be great if parents could definitely, you know, you have a system in mind. I think it'd be great if parents could be kind of looped into that to support their learners and support the teachers and getting their learners where they need to be. So that would be, I would like to see that as well. And I know you're not ready for that tonight, but when we come back.
Ms. Barker, one other quick thing, I apologize. I know you have a lot of questions, and I don't want to, if we could maybe rotate through the board so that others, if they have questions as well.
I have one other question I want to get.
Okay, absolutely.
Hang on, because we tend not to get back to where we need to be. So January 5th, why aren't we starting on the 19th? I mean, January 5th, January 19th, why are we not starting on the 5th? The other way around.
Yeah, so it was because we wanted time to make sure we were able to implement the schedule. Already the 5th is a Tuesday, so that's going to be a 4-day week already. And then the following week is, to give the teachers and students time to learn how to sign up and what the offerings are going to be. We wanted to just give that 2-week time period before we made the shift. And we felt like the weekend after, the Tuesday after Martin Luther King was a good starting point. So that's why we put it.
Can we bring that up sooner to the 11th at least? I mean, I feel like we're just losing time. I don't know if that's a possibility, if that was discussed.
We're certainly open to doing that. We would need to talk with the administrators and make sure that works, but that's certainly a possibility.
Okay. Mr. McNally, if anyone else wants to talk, I can wait on the other ones.
Like I said, I definitely want everybody to have the opportunity to get all questions in, and for as long as it takes, I think we know we'll take as long as we have to with that. I just want to make sure that nobody is feeling like they're left out. I know that others may have questions. So if not, we can certainly continue on. You have some of the same ones I think I do. So does anybody else have any questions they wanted to jump in on?
I'll start, Mr. McNally. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank the administration and the staff and the administrators at the high school for taking a look at this, listening to our stakeholders, students, parents, and the board as well. It's really important that we get our kids back as soon as possible with as much time as we talked about in school as we're allowed to do within the parameters. I wanted to just highlight a couple things. I had asked some questions about this kind of setup, and I just wanted to highlight, as we were talking about the priority standards, Mrs. Herman, I just want to highlight that the extra time for students that are excelled or looking for more to do, they could come in and do something like an extra lab in science, for instance, Mr. McNally, your specialty. And it would be something that wouldn't be taught in class because it's outside the realm of the priority standards. Is that correct?
I think that could happen.
It could happen, right? I'm just using that as an example because we've talked about what it could do for special ed, what it could do for a student seeking more support. I just want to make sure we highlight what it could do for a student that is looking for extra curriculum. So if you could give us a couple examples maybe of what it could be like for students that are looking for any sort of curriculum examples outside the parameters of priority curriculum. Does that make sense?
Well, I do. I think the one example that I might go to is the one that was shared in the video, where it is the AP research class, where it's not necessarily adding additional content, but it is allowing for an increased number of one-on-one conferences, an increased number of coaching sessions with their writing and their research process. So the extended learning time, or what we now call office hours and will transition to extended learning time, has been used to support AP students, general ed students, standard students, as well as English language learners and our special education students. It's really trying to use the data of where the students are and then give them that flexible use of that time to go deeper.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're highlighting exactly that we're going to bend that time for whatever the demographic need is. Because our kids are at all different levels, I just want to highlight that we're going to be supporting them at whatever their needs may be. It's more in an individualized learning plan, which is going to be somewhat unique for a lot of people to get used to. So it's going to take a lot of communication on the part of the student and parent with the teacher. So that's it. That was really my only question clarification point. So I really like what I hear tonight. I think it's a really great step to what we can do. I mean, other schools around us, I know a lot of people don't like the comparison, but it's hard not to compare to our schools locally. They're really the maximum they can do with something like that. Everyone has to abide by the 6-foot rule. No one has extra high schools, sadly, in their district. So everyone has to do some sort of hybrid right now. And so I really appreciate the efforts on this. So that's really all I wanted to say. Mr. McNally, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody?
I do.
Okay,
And I have one or
McCabe
two.
was up next.
I don't have much.
Okay.
But I would agree with Mrs. Parker. If we can do January 11th, let's get going. I understand that's putting pressure on probably some work you've already done, but if whatever the board can do to support that, I would be for it. I thank you again. From my point of view, this is wonderful. I'm feeling that you have done an amazing job of getting our kids back into school, and I like that Mondays are gone and you've added more time. So thank you so much for all your work. It is greatly appreciated. I just really have two kind of logistic questions. One is, if I'm not in person that day, if I'm a remote student, can I come to school? Or if, because I'm remote, I can never come to school? And if I'm in the remote group, can I come to school anyway? If I'm remote because it's not my in-person day, can I come to that extended learning? And then my other question is about lunch and what happens with that piece. And my last piece is, how are we going to communicate this? We're in the kind of that strange period of time when parents aren't necessarily looking for things from the school district, but it is, as I know you know, this is going to be really important to them. So those are things I have on my mind.
Okay, so really there were a couple of logistical questions, and again, one of those is one of the ones I have. So I'll let someone, whoever would be appropriate, address that. And so I think the first one is on the remote, and I'm going to expand that question to kind of encompass mine as well. Essentially, can anyone come in for any one of those remotes, even if it's, if they're odd and it's an even day? Can they come in if, of course, by consent of teacher?
I can answer all of those questions.
Okay, great.
I took a list, so we'll just go down in order. So the access on the day that you're not physically attending school. The first constraint would be the capacity of the room that you're trying to come to. So that's the purpose of the pass system. So just making up an example, if the fifth hour class has a capacity of 10 and 9 students attending school that day have already chosen, well, now there's only room for one more. That doesn't mean that teachers can't connect to students remotely also, or in addition, on those afternoon times. Presumably, families are choosing remote education because they don't want to be in the building. So we need to find that balance for the afternoon time between serving the kids in person and serving the ones who are at home. At least 1/3 of the students have chosen, I'm not coming into the school for school. So long answer to a shorter question. Can people not attending on a day? Yes, with asterisks after the answer. The second question was about lunch. One of the benefits of having lunch during that interim period between where the blocks end and the afternoon session starts is that we're not using any spaces in the building as teaching space during that 35 minutes. So the cafeteria is open. Of course, only about 46 kids can go in there at a time because there's also adults in there. But we can also use the auditorium foyers, the little theater at East. If it's nice, go outside. I know that doesn't help us for January so much, but come April and May, maybe we can go outside. That really will be dependent, the locations will be dependent upon how many students sign up. At the beginning, we're not going to run the lunch line. We're still going to have the grab and go like we have had since October. So students will have a lunch. They won't be lining up in a lunch line. They'll just grab one and find a place to sit.
And will that be, the grab and go would be open to any student?
Yes, they have been. So if you are at if you're out one of the high schools at dismissal, they just have bags of lunch set up, hundreds of them set up to take.
It, yeah.
That's why our lunch count went way up once we came back to in person in mid-October.
Okay.
And then for your communication question, I think part of what you mentioned is some of the challenge of communicating all of this right away is that people aren't necessarily paying attention to school over winter break. So any major significant rollout aside from this will be the plan probably can't happen until we come back to school. It can't happen effectively. We're certainly not going to wait till then to say, here is the bell schedule, for example, or here's the calendar. We'll be posting the calendar tomorrow, I expect. But having people pay attention to that is a different question because right now we're not in school.
Can I ask can I jump in and ask just a follow-up on that piece, Mrs. McCabe, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Are we going to do a parent link at some point over break? about this particular announcement, Mr. Moore?
I'm looking towards Dr. Pearson. I think
Okay.
the answer is yes.
Yeah, we are going to work on a communication to go out to families so that they know about the change.
All right, thank you.
I think that not knowing all the pieces, and high school is very complicated, and that part I do know. I think if you have that, the remote Monday on the, well, everybody's coming back on the 5th. Okay. I know that's a really tight timeline. I really would like to see the kids on January 11th. So whatever we can do would be great. Thank you for all your work. I do appreciate it.
I would concur with that as well. Okay, I think the next person I saw that looked like they were ready to ask questions was Mr. Bryant, I think.
I'll allow Ms. Fairgrave. Looks like she has some questions, so
Okay.
I'll let her go. I know she's had her hand up for a little bit.
It's hard as you know, it's hard. So I apologize if I get out of order here.
That's so perfectly okay. So Mr. Moore, if you think about a Monday through Friday student schedule, how much are we increasing instructional time by?
So every class, because I'll start over. We're dropping remote Monday, which subtracts 45 minutes. We're adding another day of blocks, which over the 2 weeks adds another 75-minute period, but we're adding 5 minutes to every class. So if we just average out the 2 weeks into a single week, we're going from 185 minutes to 187.5. So really no meaningful change in the class time. That does not include the extended session in the afternoon.
But the extended session, but to interject, I mean, the extended session is really replacing office hours and giving a student the opportunity to be in person.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then my next question would be, and perhaps this goes to Dr. Herman. So as we look at the primary standards that are required, what percentage is that we are going to accomplish this year compared to the total curriculum?
Well, again, talking at the high school, one of the things that we had the 2 high school principals present back in October was the work that the PLCs did, mapping that out and trying to do those learning gaps and to make sure that they had some assessments and that the curriculum maps were hitting all the essential standards for semester 1. That would be one of the reasons why, having talked with the teacher team who generated this new model, again, some of them were on that team and know about this, but teachers will not know about this change. And we want to make sure that we give them 1 or 2 PLC sessions to make the adjustments to the curriculum, because going from having a 45-minute block to having 45-minute short session to replacing that with more blocks could definitely make some adjustments to how they want to deliver that curriculum. But again, our PLCs have the maps so that each of their units and the learning that's targeted in each one of those units. And again, we will not necessarily add more essential standards. What we will do, we'll go deeper and give kids more practice in the standards that we had already identified.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I'm not sure that, let me rephrase my question. So what I'm asking is, of the essential standards that the experts established, what percentage is that compared to the total curriculum that it should be covered in a year? So our essential standards, is that meeting 50% of the curriculum? Is it 90% of the curriculum? Where are we at from a curriculum coverage standpoint?
I would have to look up specifics because each content area shifted their content. For example, in mathematics, there was a certain percentage of units that went from being, essential or optional to essential. I would have to get back with you to say department by department how many did it go from our typical standards to our essential standards? I'd need some time to pull that together.
I guess at least for me, certainly my board colleagues can speak up, but at least for me, I feel we should know that. I feel that we should know by the end of this school year, will we be at 75% coverage of the curriculum that every student should have been exposed to, or what that looks like? So that would be my ask.
I would agree, Ms. Fairgraves. I asked similarly, are we going to be able to cover more curriculum? Are we going to be able to add, given this schedule, and having students more in person and having students with teachers who are in the building with them, and teachers that are remote with remote students for as much as we can.
I think I just want to jump in really quickly here. I think it's important to know that, but at the same time, I think we have to remember that teaching is fluid, and there might be times where you need to spend an extra few days on a topic or a unit, and there might be days where you have to jump ahead. It just you never know. It depends on your class makeup, the students. So to give a percentage right now, I think is not something that can really happen with absolute certainty.
I think that's.
I don't agree with that, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with that, and that's why, in my viewpoint, the teachers are the experts, and they need to evaluate the needs of their class and make adjustments for the curriculum, moving faster ahead, adding enhancements, whatever that is. But I think there's going to be some variance, right? I don't know that we should be anticipating that we're going to be at 50% of the curriculum covered by the end of the year. That is very different from being somewhere between 80 and 95. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm looking for, is just more of a benchmark scale.
If I can jump in on that as well, just to, speak from my experience as well. I think that's what Mr. Bryan is kind of getting at, is that in a typical year, you can say, I want to cover 100% of the standards. And in a typical year, you may not, because of certain things. Again, classes are the vagaries of the classes year to year. And in this environment, there's kind of double the uncertainty. But I do agree that, certainly, and I don't think anybody said it was going to be at 50%, but certainly we do want to try to cover as much of that as we possibly can, because one of the questions I have really relates to testing and our testing, in all testing, but AP specifically, more specifically anyway, relative to the rest of the country, because of the way we've done things in Illinois relative to the rest of the country. I have concerns there. But again, I think it's a very difficult thing for a teacher to be able to say right now with a lot of precision, but certainly what do we have covered as far as our planned curriculum? I think that's a very fair question.
Well, and just to clarify, nobody has said 50% to my knowledge. I haven't heard any number. So that's why I'm just throwing out examples. I don't know where we're at. And then the last question that I had, again, back on the curriculum, specifically related to science, it feels like to me, and feedback I have gotten, is that we have opportunities for improvement, specifically as it relates to labs. And I'm wondering what our thoughts are, and how do we build upon what we've done in first semester to make it better under our COVID environment for the second semester. Specifically, biology, we're not doing any labs. Anatomy, did none. Forensics, wasn't able to really do any either in any type of in-person setting. So those are just 3 examples. And if it's a resource issue, I would advocate that the board supports making purchases for that. If it's microscopes or whatever it is, I don't know. Again, I'm not the expert in the classroom, but I do know there's a desire to be able to do some type of lab work to improve upon the class.
I would agree with you, Mrs. Fairgrave. I think those extra times, extended time, as we're calling it, I think there's opportunity for labs there. Now, whether it's not a priority curriculum, so maybe it's offered as an additional extra credit to students that want to do the labs, because if you make it required, some students are still catching up. Maybe you have to structure it differently and offer it as an optional lab to those students that can do it versus required. Maybe you offer it that way, I don't know. But I think for those students that want to do it in that extended time, I think there's an opportunity there for the sciences. I would agree with you on that. But I think you have to position it differently in the sense of not making it required, because you have so many students at different performance levels. You have to be very cautious about that, about getting students more and more behind because of the remote learning.
I think that Mr. McNally, if you would speak to like some of the critical understandings that can come from lab work.
Could I interview?
I was just trying to get at that. So go ahead, Mrs. McCabe. I don't want to interrupt.
I would really like to hear from Dr. Pearson and Dr. Herman about what's actually happening and focus on what our high school is doing. I'm sorry to go that direction, but not having a high schooler, I do believe labs are important. So I'd like to hear what our high school is doing.
Well, and if I'll just jump in, make my comment, and certainly I want to hear from them as well. But as far as students not being required to do labs because they may be behind, the labs, kind of the purpose of the labs is to hit those learners at that other, I have kids who excel at labs, and that's where they finally get something, because, but again, that's the purpose of the labs, the hands-on experience. I do see a problem with doing labs just logistically because of the spacing. And so essentially for me to be able to conduct a lab in a classroom myself, I'm not, unless I have a classroom, I fortunately where I am have a fairly large classroom. I could probably conduct a lab for almost everybody. But logistically, I don't know that it's possible. And so what would end up having to happen is a teacher would have to set up that lab multiple times in order to attend to a class. But as far as that being curtailed because a student is behind, frankly, a lot of times that's what catches them up.
I understand, but it's not, I don't believe it's considered priority curriculum right now. And my point is, if you looked at the F report, we have to be cautious of making sure our kids are getting what they need to learn the primary and priority curriculum first.
Certainly, that's why I'm saying logistically there's a difficulty with labs, but
yeah.
But
and I'm really just posing the question. I would really go back and rely on the teachers to provide their expertise with the objective that we do something improved upon what we're doing today. I can tell you, because I have 2 students in high school, they didn't do labs.
Right.
So, and also in talking with teachers, there's a desire to be able to do that, at least at that time. And, today that might change, but
right.
That's really what prompted that question.
No, I agree. And in fact, a lot of kids sign up for things like forensic science specifically because, hey, they want those labs. Mrs. McCabe, you said you wanted to ask, looks like Mrs. Parker has some questions or some comments on this. I'd like to go to the experts. Mrs. McCabe would like to ask as well.
No, I would like to have I just want the question answered. What is happening with labs? And then is there a resource issue because we've had to spread kids out?
Okay.
I'm going to ask Christine Warren to comment both on the science labs. And I think we also have a very good example for how course teams are making adjustments based on priority standards and shifting some units. So I'll let her share both of those examples, science and algebra.
Thank you, Dr. Herman. I need to raise my hand, Ed, and wave at you a little bit. Just wanted to address science really quick. We did purchase something called Gizmos. It is a board-approved resource that we have used in other grade levels. That was purchased for both high schools. I don't have the usage report, but I'm happy to pull that. But that does allow for virtual labs to be happening in our science classes. And our lead teachers and our science teachers are really excited about receiving that tool. So those are virtual labs. It's certainly not the in-person hands-on lab that we would desire, but it certainly is a virtual option for our teachers and for our students. The other piece is just to give you a more specific example regarding algebra. And I think the percentage of curriculum is very difficult to answer because it could be different for every course. But specific to algebra, we have 2 particular units that we just sent communication. We had teachers provide feedback where we are actually removing 2 full units from algebra. One of those units will be absorbed in geometry next year. So it's actually the unit dependency doesn't rely on that unit. So it was very easy for us to marry that to the geometry curriculum. There are more days in our geometry and algebra 2 instructional time to deliver the curriculum than there is in our algebra. Algebra is a little bit tighter. So one of those units again has been moved to geometry, and then the following year, so we're talking about absorbing this in years to come, the second unit will be absorbed in the functions unit in our Algebra 2 curriculum in 2 years. So our algebra students this year will get the additional unit in geometry next year, and then the other unit in Algebra 2. And so they might not all get it all in the algebra, but we are looking at absorbing that and making sure that all of the curriculum and standards are taught across their, whatever that content area is. So that's one example of what we've done with the standards in the curriculum.
So Dr. Warren, just a follow up to that, do you foresee then that you'll make that, assuming it goes successful over the next couple of years, do you foresee you'll make that as a permanent change in the curriculum because perhaps it's better suited in geometry and algebra 2?
That's a really great question. I can say I know for sure one unit is of interest of teachers moving that into geometry because it allows for a little bit more time in algebra. I'm not comfortable making that decision without a team of teachers coming together and having that conversation and really drilling down for their feedback, but it certainly is open for conversation and the teachers have asked if that is a possibility as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and now Mrs. McCabe, did that sufficiently answer the questions you had?
I just was looking for the answer from our people, that's all. So if Mrs. Fairgrieve is comfortable with the answer, then I'm fine too.
Well, I think you did ask something of Dr. Pearson, Mrs. McCabe, so I don't.
I wanted to know what was really going on. Since you have 2 students who didn't have the labs, I take that as evidence, and Dr. Warren talking about that, I am assuming that the priority standards are the state's way of narrowing what we have to do with kids this year. Doesn't mean that they're not going to learn those other standards in the rest of their career, but these are the ones that are most essential. And teachers work through that curriculum. I'm not as interested in the percentage because actually I want them to get 100% of the priority standards, period. However, the curriculum is used to get to those standards. The curriculum is not the standard. The curriculum is the resource to get to that standard. So I would expect teachers to figure out how they are to get the kids to master the standards that are expected. That's where I land. And that's done through the PLC work. I wasn't going to talk about it, but you got me going.
Mrs. Fairgrieve, I too have a high schooler who has not had the hands-on science labs in the spring or fall. So I certainly understand that reflection of wondering what's going on in science. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yep.
Okay.
And Mr. McNally, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Bryant, have you had your questions answered? I know you probably, some of them may have been answered, but I know some of mine have been, so.
Yes, many of my questions have been answered. I just want to briefly just jump in here. I think this extended period is going to be great for those interventions for those students that are really going to need it, and also the enrichment opportunities. This is the, I think with the enrichment, that's what makes high school fun and exciting for some of these kids. I also think it's going to be a great way for the students to connect on more of a personal level at times with their teachers, working on that social emotional piece, even connecting with with their classmates as well. So I really do think this period is a great idea. Now I do have a question, and I'm probably going to have a follow-up question for it. Mr. Moore, and this was brought up in citizen comments today earlier. I see an issue. There's a major issue right now, I feel, where we have students that are supposed to be in person, but are choosing to learn remotely for the day. Do you have any numbers on that? Like how many, on a daily basis, how many kids that are supposed to be in the building are choosing to stay home?
We started tracking that roughly the 1st of November with an attendance code. Of course, the students are counted as present, but we still recorded it. Mrs. Christensen will probably shake her head at me when I throw a number out, but I think of her on any given day, roughly 750 who were students were expected to come to school. A good 150 weren't, but were showing up remotely. Am I off on that estimate?
Yes, we ended up with about 450 to 500 students in attendance on those days.
So about 150 weren't, or 250 almost.
Correct, 250.
Now, towards the later November, it's hard to know why. I mean, there is no way to know why that was happening without asking. As the COVID numbers were going up, that could have been some of the calculation on the part of a family. But for high school, because we teach the in-person and the remote students simultaneously, it's easy to do that, just to be frank.
Yeah.
For second semester, we are splitting out some of the full remote students into their own separate sections in some core areas. There's not a lot of that happening, but there is some. But I'm not sure that's going to make any difference.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, that seems like a ton of students that are choosing to stay home, and for whatever reason they are, that's for them to decide. But I feel that those students are probably the ones that need to be in the building even more, but they're choosing to stay home. Do we have there been any discussions about trying to maximize the number of students coming into the buildings that should be, or that signed up for being in the building? Because I think that causes quite a bit of when a teacher doesn't know what student's going to be in person or remote every day, I think that causes a lot of planning issues. The students that are choosing to stay home and work remotely, they might be the ones struggling, and so I'm concerned that the students that need to utilize this extra time are not going to be utilizing it because they're not coming into the buildings.
We share that concern very much. At the schools, because we started tracking that information, our deans and our attendance office start determining which students are doing it on a routine basis. I think there's a difference between a student doing that almost every day versus once. And connected to that is if they're staying home because they're sick or they're in quarantine, well, then we want them to stay home. So some portion of that, especially in November when the numbers were pretty darn high, a portion of that was student on quarantine. But our deans and our attendance office will start addressing that as we come back to school starting in January, and they'll have strategies for that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. And then I just have one other logistical question. With the 2 sessions for the extended time, if a student can choose to go to one and not the other, what opportunity, if a student chooses or gets a pass for the second session, what opportunities will they have for the first session?
We'll have locations for them. Presumably, if they're not going to a teacher, then they don't need to. So they'll be able to, up to a certain number limit, use the library or the cafeteria. And connected to that is if you're attending the first session and not the second, and you can get a ride, you're free to go home.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think Ms. Fairgrave had a bunch of questions there.
Not a bunch. Have we given any thought to communicating behavior expectations for the students? And where I'm going with this is I have tremendous empathy for the teachers at the high school that are trying to teach to students with a myriad of black screens. You know, there seems to be a huge challenge, probably for a variety of reasons, for students to have their cameras on, and the teachers are trying desperately to get these students engaged. And so have you guys talked about that at all, and any thoughts on how we can improve that or why we can't?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Richter and Ms. Christensen for specifics on that one.
I would also just want to jump in while they're preparing to respond. There have been some interesting research both for academic as well as social emotional reasons why there are pros and cons for students having to show their screen. For some students who have anxiety or other issues, it can be very difficult to be on camera that long. One of the other things is that it can, some parents and family members have concerns for their own privacy of showing some of the things that might be occurring in their house. It can help with face-to-face communication. So some teachers might have it be where they are requiring cameras to be on during small breakout groups, but during the more large whole group instruction, they aren't requiring that. Again, we don't have a one-size-fits-all rule, but we are trying to make sure that teachers know of different strategies so that they can try and get as many kids engaged as possible.
Okay. Ms. Fairgreaves, did you have more?
I was going to say, Mrs. Herman, there was an article I read too about how beneficial sometimes the audio only can be. Obviously tonight I have something else going on with my personal health and life, and so I have audio only. And so in circumstances and if there's something going on in their personal life, they can do audio only. At least they're engaged without having to have the anxiety, or if they have something physical going on with their picture. So it's just a thought that maybe teachers can recommend that as well.
So for my part, again, my thought on the matter is I prefer to see my students, if not in person, I prefer them in person always. I don't like looking at 2-inch picture, 1-inch pictures really of students and having to scroll back and forth. One of the concerns I know they had was, again, for that privacy issue and for what might be going on in someone's home or what someone's home might look like. And they do have backgrounds where, at least to address that issue, there are backgrounds where it's a virtual background. All you can see is the student be in front of a virtual backdrop. And I believe that our software has that capability as well. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That was just my only 2 cents. Just I know that I don't like not being able to see what's going on, because I know there's kind of the log on and leave mentality for some. So
I think the other thing I'd want to point out is we are trying to help our teachers use some of the other ways of doing engagement, which would be through polling or, having students show, signs or chat or leave a message or a thought in the chat box. So I want you to know that, having that visual connection is one way to check for student engagement, but teachers are using many other ways of the Zoom tool to check and see who's responding, how often they're responding, are they understanding?
Right. No, I use those as well. It's just for the continuity of it. It's the camera's better, but I know not certainly a cure-all either. Mrs. Fairgrieve, I think you had another question related to this, or perhaps another.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Now I'm going to kind of rotate back then. Parker, you had, I know you had questions.
Mm-hmm. Can we speak to where all the teachers who are not on FMLA going to be working from on January 5th? Can we just get a little blurb about that?
Yes. This question applies primarily to high school. At middle school and elementary, the teachers who are not working in person are teaching fully remote anyway, so I don't think there's an issue there. At high school, there are teachers that have continued to have ADA approved accommodations to work remotely, and they will continue to do that. There is no more childcare leave under FFCRA, so the federal law does not have that as an option anymore. I had one teacher today ask for the rest of the semester off because of that change, which means finding a substitute, of course. We will continue to require quarantine and isolation for individuals who are exposed to COVID, and we will continue to allow them to teach remotely as opposed to using none of their services while they're on quarantine. We need somebody to supervise the classroom, but a teacher on quarantine teaching remotely is superior to a substitute teaching for 10 days, in my opinion. So anyway, approved for remote, continued to be approved for remote is those with ADA accommodations. The childcare leaves are no longer approved. And then quarantine and isolation, yes, they'll be able to work for the duration of their quarantine, assuming they're healthy enough to do so. You know, if somebody actually has COVID and is not able to teach, we would not.
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to ask this as a wild question, but I'm going to ask it. What happens if, let's say, we choose not to follow the school-based social distancing guidelines and just go back to 5 days per week of everybody there? Not saying I disagree or agree with anything. I just want to know what happens. If anyone's got an answer on that one.
Well, one of the answers is there's a school district downstate that originally decided not to require masks, and the governor's office sued them. And whichever court, and I'm sorry, I forget which one, I believe it was in Sangamon County, found for the governor in that case. The school district is Hudsonville, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay, so Hudsonville. All right.
I think I'll find the exact, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Okay. Thank you. When will we begin discussing both the spring senior celebrations and then any contingencies for next year? Start that next year planning.
Yeah, so I think you probably know, Ms. Barker, that as we turn the corner into January, we are already usually in a normal year looking at the following fall and starting to build schedules in those kinds of, just in a typical year. And so, of course, we are beginning the conversation to look at what the fall will look like and trying to figure out, what our options will be. And I think before that, though, I had a conversation with the high school principals just last week about looking at spring celebrations, recognitions, and then opportunities for connection. I know that that's something that we are hearing that some families and students are missing some of the clubs and activities that are typical. And so I know that both high schools will be putting together a committee of some parents to help us look at our spring celebrations and recognitions. Hopefully we can do those as normal. I think realistically, there may be still some restrictions in place for some of those activities. And so as we begin to think about what those might look like, we want to engage some of our parents that, are typically helping us in our schools think about some of those celebrations and recognitions and help us plan some options, for some of those things. And hopefully we'll have some ways to do those recognitions differently than what we were able to do last spring when everything was really restricted. I think we have more options available this year.
I think that's great to include the parents. And do we know when you'll be kind of searching for parents to apply for that?
Mrs. Christensen or Mr. Richter, do you want to speak to that?
Well, as Dr. Pearson had mentioned, we are still just beginning our conversations with that. And Ms. Christensen and I have been talking about what a process might look like for recruiting that parental and student involvement in that process. And so I would anticipate that as soon as we come back to school in January and get a chance to sort of launch the second semester, we're going to be starting that process shortly thereafter.
Okay, thank you. That sounds great. I do want to ask about, we've heard quite a few times about using the Norris Cultural Arts Auditorium. Has this been discussed? What was determined? And that for choir and for other?
Yeah. So the music teachers, I actually talked to one of our lead teachers last week as well, are going to be reviewing the guidelines from the national associations and also to see if there's been any changes related to the recommendations for in-person experiences in music. Whether you choose to believe it or not, singing is a super spreader event. It's just that the aspiration that happens when you sing and the force that you use definitely does seem to be a time and a place where it is more at a higher risk for students and for staff. And we, of course, want to keep them safe. At the same time, we understand that music is an important part of some students' day at school. And of course, you know, although there are lots of things that you can learn in a music class related to music that are not performance related. If you're in a performance ensemble, the reason you're taking that class is because you do want to perform. So they are both the band and of course our orchestra groups can play when they're at school, but both the band and the choir teachers are going to be looking at those guidelines to see if we can make any changes for second semester using our larger spaces, and then also making sure that we still meet the guidelines from the national that kind of govern those.
Thank you. And then when will we be coming back to the elementary day? I know we had the list of options. Is that coming back up soon? For discussion?
Ms. Geyer, do you want to speak to elementary at all?
So at the November, October, I can't remember which
I think it was
LNT
November
meeting. Was it November? We shared with you what our recommendation was for this year regarding the options and why. So I'm not, at this time, we were not bringing anything back. That's where we were going.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Barker, any other questions?
Nope, I'm done now.
Okay, Ms. McCabe has her hand up, I think.
Dr. Pearson, I'm so grateful to have the high school people here and to have this conversation. Our community is pretty well divided, as I think many communities are, on this whole thing. We all want to get back to normal. I'm tired of looking at 2-inch people as well. Do you think there's a way we could bring occasionally a group of students or teachers to just tell us what's going on? And I haven't thought about it. I'm just thinking off the cuff here. An opportunity to hear, you know, we're getting a lot of comments that people, and I get that. I'm not suggesting that, but I want to know what the life of a student is, and the life of a teacher. And maybe that's asking too much of everybody at this point in time, but maybe towards the end of January or early February, some kind of conversation or presentation about what's going on. And is that unreasonable to ask? Just a way to make sure that we're really getting the reality of, and maybe no other board member really cares. I'm just trying to figure out how to.
No, I think it's important to hear the student and teacher perspective. And I think there are a variety of experiences that are happening out there. I mean, we've even heard that from some of the comments that we've heard from everyone, from you know, some that feel like they've had a really good experience or that it's working really well for them, to others that are really struggling. So finding opportunity for that voice is important. And it's something we could work on to try to bring. I know that at the high school level, our principals regularly engage with student groups, with focus groups, to kind of solicit feedback. So it's possible that we could use one of those focus groups or some of those folks that they're talking with to help us kind of hear what's going on with students, and we could bring that to the board. So let us work on that, and we can find some way to do that.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCabe, I was going to say, I think I think maybe why we're all not asking for that is we all have kids in our home, so we get the first view perspective of students in the district. But I think, to your point, to Dr. Pearson's point, I think it would be interesting to see the breadth of variance of experiences. Obviously, I only have the experience of my student, and every board member has the experience of their own students in their home. And of course, you know, we hear of the other students' experiences from their comments that are so courageously shared with us. But I think it would be good to hear from more. I think we did talk, President Manheim, myself, and Dr. Pearson talked about at some point getting a student group together. And I think that's something he's going to pursue with the principals as well. Getting a group of students together at the high schools and at some time, hopefully prospective parents to get some feedback about the COVID experience and what we can do better. So hopefully we can maybe bring those people in. So that might be something as well.
And thank you, Ms. Weibel. I do respect that all of you have children in your homes. My two grandchildren have given me a lot of insight on their lives. I guess I'm looking for that, what you suggested, the variety of experiences that people have had. I have heard from parents who said, I've heard a lot of parents say, my one kid does great in remote. My other kid, this is the worst thing ever. And I think parents are beginning to see that their children learn differently as well. So I'm just trying to figure out a way of getting a perspective that doesn't come from a social media, that is coming from the people who are, you know, I'm not trying to start another war.
No, I think with everything, you want to get it directly from the source.
Yeah.
You don't want to get it third hands. And I think that's something we always try to share our message with the community is get the information firsthand. And I think that's really important that you shared that. So I think it's good.
I would support that as well. I'm interested in hearing more than just what's happening, certainly in my house, but also, you know, out there, the teacher's perspective too.
Well, I also would like to hear from the one thing I don't want to do is overwhelm people and ask people to do one more thing, because I'll tell you the one thing from a teacher's perspective, again, not in this district, but the one word I would use is overwhelmed. I think teachers, administrators, board members, students, everyone's overwhelmed. And I think that's something that needs to happen kind of, I guess to use the word organically. You know, I know the teachers are working very hard to make sure that they're teaching all the standards, they're getting all those things in, they're making sure that they're hitting all those things that we need to hit, because they understand that we have a school report card and they want to do well on it. And I just don't want to give them one more thing to do. If they can share that organically, that's fantastic. But I'm not looking to form another committee because I don't want somebody else to have one more commitment. Believe me, I know what it's like to take on that one more commitment and then feel like you're drowning. So.
I agree. I hear you. I'm there too.
So, okay. I think we've probably, I don't know that we've exhausted this topic because we could be on it forever. But I think that unless anybody has an objection, I'd like to move to the next item because we've got a couple more things to talk about. So I'd like to move on to the next item. Item 5B is the equity goal update. Dr. Herman, you're muted.
I am sharing my screen.
Okay.
And you can see all of my emails. All right. Excuse me. There we go. Okay, well, thank you very much for having this on the agenda this evening. We're pleased to be here to share with the board and the community a plan for addressing the equity goal created by our school board. I'm Denise Herman, Chief Academic Officer, and I am here with...
Hi, Cindy Roosh, Director of Staff, Family, and Student Services.
And we are representing many other members of the learning and teaching team who have contributed to putting elements of this plan together. First of all, the presentation tonight addresses two policies in particular. 610, Educational Philosophy and Objectives, which states that the district's educational program will seek to provide an opportunity for each student to develop his or her maximum potential. The objectives for the educational program are to foster student self-discovery, self-awareness, and self-discipline. 2, to develop students' awareness of and appreciation for cultural diversity. 3, stimulate students' intellectual curiosity and growth. 4, provide students with fundamental career concepts and skills. And 5, help students develop sensitivity to the needs and values of others and a respect for individual and group differences. 6, help each student strive for excellence and instill a desire to reach the limit of his or her potential. Encourage students to become lifelong learners. And 8, provide an educational climate and culture free of bias concerning the protected classifications identified in Policy 710, Equal Education Opportunities. In addition, the school board and strategic commitments demonstrate a commitment to academic excellence for all students and an understanding that community resources must be allocated to ensure exemplary student growth, academic achievement, and positive social emotional development of all D303 students. In March 2021, the board developed a plan to, the board created a goal that stated by March 2021, we should develop a plan to create a culture that supports equity, diversity, and inclusion for CUSD 303 students and staff that reflects our diverse society and develops skills in appreciating differences, overcoming conflicts, and contributing to society. The board established an action to support this goal, to select an outside organization to assist the district in completing an equity audit. Tonight, we will share a preliminary plan with steps that we can have in place to best support the work in the district to achieve the goal established by the board. However, this preliminary plan will be refined and finalized with input from district leadership and stakeholder groups. In order to achieve this goal, this evening we have the following recommendations. To approve a contract to partner with Deep Equity to facilitate the implementation of the equity goal in D303, and approval to hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion director for the 21-22 school year. In our presentation that follows, we will provide the board with further details to support this recommendation.
So to help frame the larger conversation this evening, we feel it's important to share some information related to the Illinois State Board of Education 2020 to 2023 plan that was shared with the public this November. Is a roadmap for all of the Illinois public schools through the 2020-2023 school year. The plan is built around 3 overarching goals, all underpinned by equity, student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. These goals are held together by 4 principles: equity, quality, collaboration, and community. As such, the Illinois State Board of Education, like CUSD 303, recognizes the importance of the work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. And I did include a link at the bottom for you to be able to access that document if you'd like to read it in its entirety. While there are many important goals and strategies that are outlined in the ISB document, we will not be elaborating on those this evening. We do feel that it's important to share one of the equity strategies that is outlined on the Illinois State Board of Education's plan. As you can see, by the end of the 22-23 school year. The Equity Journey Continuum will be published on each school district's 2022 school report card. Similar to what is stated in the ISB document, in D303, the work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion is foundational to implementing key strategies and achieving our goals. We see this work as being integrated into our existing goals and initiatives, as well as serving as an area of focus to guide the development of future goals and initiatives.
As stated in the ISBE document, all schools in Illinois are on a journey to achieve equity across the state. This slide gives an overview of the equity journey we will be taking over the next few years. Our journey began in May of 2020 in the aftermath of the homicide of George Floyd and subsequent violence across our nation that followed, when the district issued, quote, a message about equity, diversity, and inclusion from D303, unquote, to all stakeholders, stating that as educators, we take our role seriously in providing a safe place for students and staff members to listen to and appreciate a variety of options, while recognizing how diversity strengthens a learning community. At the same time, we embrace this opportunity to renew our resolve to students and families that they are seen, heard, and matter. It is evident that this generation of students has and will continue to be the impetus for societal change. And we do not accept behavior that marginalizes people, and we will do our part to fight racism and hate within our schools and community. This in turn led to the development of our district equity goal. Again, in order to achieve the goal, senior leadership and the Department of Teaching and Learning have spent this fall researching outside organizations to partner with our district, engaging in professional learning related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and networking with other school leaders in the same work. This has led to the development of the plan we are sharing tonight. You can see that we will be starting this spring with professional learning at the district and building levels in order to build the capacity to provide professional learning to teachers. There is also a strand for building leadership capacity of students. As we continue in the presentation, more information on the action timeline will be given.
When the board first established the equity goal for the district, they recognized the importance of partnering with an outside organization to support this journey. After much deliberation, we are recommending that the district partner with Deep Equity. So what is Deep Equity? In their own words, Deep Equity is a comprehensive and systemic professional development process aimed at producing the deep personal, professional, and organizational transformations that are necessary to create equitable places of learning for all of our nation's children. This capacity building program helps educators dismantle disparities through sustained collaborative efforts and courageous leadership. Again, at the bottom of the slide is a link to Deep Equity's website. So why should D303 partner with Deep Equity? First, it has an evidence-based process. The Deep Equity process has been proven to make a measurable impact on student outcomes. Second, it's a capacity building model. To maximize the impact of our equity efforts, the Deep Equity train the trainer model enables staff at each school site to continue the work long after the conclusion of the Deep Equity training. This means our leaders are trained to lead the work in the district in their individual schools. This leads to sustainability for the district. It is focused on organizational culture and climate. The Deep Equity process was designed with a deep understandings of the complexities of human relations, organizational change, and adult learning. The Deep Equity model acknowledges the need to change the culture and climate across an organization in order to achieve long-term sustainable change that addresses the root causes of educational inequities. It addresses classroom applications. Some equity models focus on building educators' understanding the equity issues without actually giving teachers specific methods to apply to the learning in their classroom. The Deep Equity process not only supports systemic equity transformation at the district level, but also provides a special focus on instructional applications for classroom educators in their classrooms. It involves strategic planning because closing the achievement and the opportunity gaps is a long-term process. The deep equity model will give us the tools to create a long-term plan for addressing the inequities after the formal training is complete. The tools help us develop the climate, the protocols, the common language, and the common goal of embedding culturally responsive teaching practices into everyday classroom instruction. And lastly, it involves students. Students have significant influence over the culture and climate of a school. The Youth Equity Stewardship, YES, model brings students into the conversation and supports intergenerational communication and collaboration. So on this slide, we've shared some of the many districts in the state, some who are very close to us, who have partnered with Deep Equity to facilitate the work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in their districts.
The Deep Equity model has 5 foundational phases, and all levels of professional development from district leadership to classroom teachers engage with each of the 5 phases during professional learning. The following 3 slides outline the 5 phases for you. Phase 1 is tone and trust, where we establish a safe climate to allow staff and students to engage in open conversation about persistent inequities. Phase 2 is personal culture and personal journey, where we define cultural competence and connect it with student outcomes. Phase 3 is social dominance to social justice, where we identify the root causes of inequities in an educational system. Phase 4, classroom implications and applications, where we focus on practical applications of culturally responsive teaching for classroom teachers. And phase 5 is systemic transformation and planning for change, where we will create a long-term sustainable plan for systemic transformation. As stated previously, the Deep Equity model has 5 phases, and all levels of professional development from district leadership to classroom teachers will engage with each of the 5 phases. Deep Equity has a train-the-trainer model. As you can see, it starts with district and building level leadership to understand and support the work. Next, teams of educators from each building attend school leadership facilitator training. Then, school leadership team members engage the rest of their colleagues in sustained cultural competence and professional learning activities. Lastly, based on their professional learning, educators use culturally responsive teaching strategies to create a culture of equity, inclusion, and excellence in every classroom and school-wide.
Students are an integral part of this process. Deep Equity has a program specifically designed for students called the Youth Equity Stewardship, or YES. Through the 5 phases of YES, students will gain the skills, training, and empowerment necessary to recognize educational disparities and become active contributors in their school improvement efforts. They will be trained to facilitate professional development in their schools, recognize how to stop bullying driven by inequity, and how to positively impact the community's understanding and acceptance of all citizens. When implemented with Deep Equity, YES empowers students to partner with the adult equity leaders in their buildings to facilitate change. And we're looking to start with our high school students. On this slide, you will see an implementation timeline for the first year of working with Deep Equity. It starts with the professional learning for district and building leadership this spring and continues into the summer. Each school will have a building leadership team who will participate in professional learning at the end of the summer. Ongoing professional learning will be provided throughout the 2021-2022 school year, and the YES program will start in the fall for students and will continue into the spring. Finally, following the train-the-train model, D303 staff will provide summer professional learning.
In addition to the work outlined in partnership with Deep Equity, as was stated in a message about equity, diversity, and inclusion from D303 in June, we will establish a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, which will consist of diverse CUSD 303 stakeholders. We would like to form a small group by March that will participate in the hiring process for the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. After the director is hired, the group will be expanded to include more participants. Their role will be to provide community input and advice about issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tonight, we are also recommending that the district hire a diversity, equity, and inclusion director to start in July of 2021. July 2021. We know that many other districts have successfully added this role to their district leadership team. On this slide, we had outlined some of the key functions of this role, which include to lead and facilitate the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Group, to conduct the equity audit, to develop equity policies, to facilitate professional learning for staff on issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, to facilitate the development of student leadership, and to facilitate the review of curriculum and programming. The work related to diversity, equity, and inclusion is important for all students in CUSD 303. It requires a person who has the expertise and experience to lead it with the time and intentionality that it deserves.
The budget for partnering with Deep Equity is $91,750. This covers the cost of the trainers and the materials. The cost of the YES program is $35,525 and covers the cost of trainers and materials to support about 75 students. Ongoing costs would be if we continue to train a new group of students each year in the YES program. So that would be an annual cost should we continue with that program each year. There would also be continued cost to receiving consulting and coaching support with Deep Equity as we implement our equity plan and continue to provide professional learning to staff. There is a cost associated, obviously, with hiring a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that cost is yet to be determined.
In closing, this evening, we have the following recommendations: to approve a contract to partner with Deep Equity to facilitate the implementation of our equity plan, and to improve the proposal to hire a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 21-22 school year. Thank you, and we look forward to answering your questions.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? I know that okay. Well, I'll leave it open.
I have a couple questions. Could we didn't get the PowerPoint slide, so I can't go back to where, did you say that was an annual cost? It was hard to hear
for the professional learning. That one-time upfront cost for the major work of training the district and leadership was that $91,000. There would be an annual cost if we continued with the student leadership program. So you would have a group of 75 students for this upcoming school year. And then if you chose to continue and do that and add a new group of students, that would be an ongoing cost. Mm-hmm. And then there would be additional costs if we chose to have consulting days or coaching days with Deep Equity.
But I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, but it's not necessarily 35,000 or 91,000, right? It's just there's an additional cost that could happen if we continue with them.
Okay.
And there's, of course, the annual cost were we to hire a director as well.
Right. So just to clarify, because this is a little different than what I knew. So we start with Deep Equity doing the professional learning work. And from there, we hire someone who will do the audit. Is that the right way that I'm looking at it? The Deep Equity goes for a longer period of time and begins the professional learning, culture, that work. And then the audit itself will be done by the equity director.
The timing of that equity audit, in talking with many other districts who have gone through this part of the implementation, they recommended that we have some professional learning among our whole administrative team prior to the equity audit. It can sometimes help with much more authentic and accurate answers as we're trying to do the audit. Sometimes when you're doing an equity audit and people aren't used to having those conversations, it can make school leaders feel defensive or like they're not doing something. And we wanted to make sure that we rolled this out in a way that was very supportive and that was revealing very accurate information about what our real practices are. So that's why we wanted to get the advisory team going, get a leader in place start that district-wide learning, and then probably in the fall is when the equity director would work in collaboration, probably with Deep Equity and some other resources, to find the right tool for us to assess, because you're typically assessing staff perception, student perceptions. So some of it's perceptional, but some of it's an analysis of your achievement data. Some of it's analysis of your discipline data. So some of those things are at our fingertips, but it will be looking at those things through an equity lens.
Okay, I appreciate that. It's not the way that my experience has gone, so I'm rethinking it. I have the piece that's harder for me to grasp is that someone that the district has on staff does the audit, only because relationships are different. So I've always seen that the work should be from an outside, more objective point of view, like we've done with the communications. Mm-hmm. I'm not against an audit, or I'm not against an equity director by any means, mm-hmm. Just that we don't see the hidden rules when we're in it. Yeah. We don't see privilege when we're in it. And so that's, to me, that is a key component. But I like the idea of the professional learning work starting right away and getting going, because I think your point is well made. If we aren't used to having that conversation, we aren't going to get to the issues at hand. So,
and I just want to follow up and clarify that the equity director wouldn't be the one, holding up our data to any criteria and giving that audit kind of feedback, but they would be assisting in gathering all of the data, or just how we have done with our communications audit. Mrs. Smith was the one who worked with the outside agency to get all of the surveys done and to get those focus groups done. So it would be in partnership with. It wouldn't be that the equity director would be doing the audit independently.
Okay. I like that you had the list of districts that have used the Deep Equity. That gives me confidence that we are, that they have built a reputation that people are using. So I appreciate the work that you put into this. And that's all I had.
Dr. Ruth had an excellent conversation with the director of equity from Naperville, and they were one of the people listed on that. Dr. Ruth, would you want to give just a highlight of what they've learned in Naperville?
I think that they found the model to be really supportive, right? And this idea of really the approach and building and establishing that culture and that tone and trust to launch into those conversations, which were so necessary and are difficult conversations. So having that common language and the common experience for staff members was really powerful to ground those conversations. I think the piece that she really mentioned that stood out for me is that the student piece. They chose not to do the yes stewardship their first year, and that was something that she said to really consider. And I think from what we heard definitely this evening, that we value students, and to develop the students' capacity to lead and work in partnership. And speaking with some of the other districts who've used the student pieces, the kids are planning with the adults, the professional learning for the adults. And that's really powerful, right? That student voice is integral. They are the leaders in their school, and they're speaking on behalf of their peers, and they're working with the adults in their building for a common goal. And I think that that's really powerful.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any thoughts, concerns on the topic at hand? Okay, it looks like then I guess we are probably ready to move on to the next topic, unless there is an objection. The next topic, item 5C, is the communications audit report.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much. I want to introduce Mr. Bob Noyed and Mr. Brett Clark, who are with CISO, and our district has been working with them since October to conduct the communications audit, and they are here to provide that report. So, Bob, I will hand it over to you. Who, by the way, Bob is joining us from Minnesota, so I'm really not going to say anything about football. Maybe I'll say something about football.
You sure can. It won't hurt my feelings at all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here to make sure that you all can see that. Oh, it's not letting me. Let's try this again.
Is it giving you an error, or is there anything you can tell me?
It's asking me to open system preferences, which has never, I don't know what that means.
Carol, do you happen to have the presentation?
I do.
Yeah, for some reason, Carol, it's not letting me share.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have it set up for all participants, so I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Let me go in and
Matt, do you want me to email it to you?
You could bring it up as well if that works.
We'll see. Are you seeing that?
Coming up now.
Okay.
There we go. I see it now.
beautiful. And I can see it too, so that's even better. Thank you so much for having us. We're going to walk through the presentation, and then Brett and I will be available for questions. Carol, just so you know, we'll try to move through this fairly quickly. If you can move to the next slide, just to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about on tonight's agenda.
I don't know why it's not moving to the next slide. Oh, okay. I'm going to have to do this pretty manually there.
There we go. There we go. We're going to spend some time talking about the components of the audit. There were four pieces that we did. We'll talk about each one of those. We'll talk about major findings, major recommendations, and then a few final thoughts. And then, of course, we'll be open for questions from you as well. And Carol, you can just keep going here to the next slide. The audit components were four. We have a tool called a baseline audit assessment. We'll talk more about that, what that is. We did an online parent survey. We did 6 focus groups, 5 parent groups, 1 staff group, and then of course we did the school board interviews. And then finally we did a assessment of the school district social media. In terms of the audit team, the team that we had in place, when we do these, we try to involve as many of our team as we can. We have 6 members of our team that are what we would call senior consultants who have been in school communication for upwards of 20 years. So we try to spread out the work and involve people as best we can. So your audit was really touched by 6 or 7 or 8 people who kind of fed into fed into the process. The final report was pulled together by 2 or 3 of us, but there was lots of opinion, lots of conversation that we had as we went through this. Let me start with the, again, the kind of primary focus of this really was on parent communication. The baseline audit kind of gives us a big perspective, but the the focus groups and the survey were really focused on the parent view. Again, we did do the one staff group, but the primary focus of the audit was on parent communication. Let me take a little time to talk about the baseline communication audit. The purpose is really to figure out in a school district what kind of foundational tactics are in place. And we have this organized in 9 strategy areas that I'll talk about in just a second. And what we do is through conversations and our own exploration, we really try to determine what's in place in a school district and what's not in a place. And the outcome is really, it gives us a really deep understanding, good understanding of kind of where we're at in terms of communication in the school district. Carol, if you can move to the next slide. These are the 9 strategy areas that we focus on. The one comment that I would have, area number 7, student enrollment, retention and recruitment. That particular area was not as, I will say, aggressive for your school district as in other states. We use this tool in states like Minnesota and Arizona, where there are open enrollments and charter schools, and kids have options, and the focus of marketing for school districts is much more intense. So the conversation around that for your school district was not the same as it would be, for example, we just did one of these in a school district in Arizona, and that took kind of a different twist. But these are the 9 areas that we spent time in. In the report that we have provided, we really try to make this report really action focused and really, and in some cases, it's a very tactical and detailed report. We also provide some perspective on strategy, but we organize our comments and our results into 3 categories: do now, do soon, and do later. And most of those are really, the do nows are really those things that are either missing or are things that can leverage other things. We also have 4 rubric categories. So for each one of the 9 areas, we will assign a rubric category. Either emerging is the entry, is the lowest one, up to exemplary, which means there's lots of things going on and lots of things working well. So again, that report really gives us a good sense of that, and there's a lot of detail that we've shared in that report that will be helpful. The online survey, let me just talk about this. This was shared with parents through email, and they could go in and do the link. We were amazed by the participation on this survey. Over 2,000, almost 2,000 responses was really incredible. You had both English and Spanish speakers go in and participate in the survey. Mostly English, but you did have some Spanish, and it was translated so they could do that. The other really interesting thing in this is you had over 70% of your participants do this on a phone, which is, it gives you some indication. Even some of the conversations we had in the focus groups, parents were telling us that they're consuming information from your school district on their phone. The days of looking at a desktop Some still do that, but lots of folks are looking at the phone. In terms of the parent survey, we really organized them by grade levels in terms of early childhood, elementary, middle, and high school. And we looked at those results. There wasn't really, there was very few differences in the range of those responses, and most of them were spot on. There was no significant difference, and also the number of participants that you had was fairly widespread across the schools. Ranging from about 29 participants at Lincoln to 410 participants at East High School, and in between that, most schools were in the 70s, 80s to low hundreds. There was a few 200 and 300. Again, a really nice spread across your schools, and again, lots of folks involved. The focus groups we did 5 groups of staff in or 5 groups of parents in one group of staff. We did a preschool group, 2 elementary groups, a middle group, and a high school group. And then we did a staff group of union leaders, and then we did the interviews of the 6 board members. The focus groups, we did those after we did the survey, primarily to start to get a little information from the survey in terms of what were some of those issues that we needed to probe more deeply. And that helped us to both craft the questions and then enter those focus groups in a way to kind of start to dig a little more deeper than we did in the online survey. Finally is the social media assessment. And we have a couple tools that we developed where a couple members of our team spent some time with Carol and Janelle and her team to really kind of dig into the social media. Again, we looked at both the analytics and the conversations, and a lot of the content from that really came about kind of sharpening strategy and thinking about how we might boost engagement through social media. So with that, I want to focus on the findings just for a second. And again, these are what I would call major significant findings. If you take a look at the baseline audit report, there's going to be a lot more detail and smaller items in there, but these are really kind of a high level things that really emerged across all of the 4 assessments. And we always like to put this in our reports. If you read nothing else or hear nothing else, what you're doing with communication with your parents is really solid, and it's seen as solid by parents. You have really good comments. Parents, obviously, they have suggestions for changes. Obviously, they have some things that aren't maybe working exactly the way they want, but it's really a high level of comment that you're getting. And our view on this isn't, and we do a lot of these, our view on this would be our changes, our suggestions are more tweaks than major adjustments. There are some things that we would suggest. Probably the 3 areas of greatest need would be some planning around communication to organize some plans and organized strategy. Internal communication is probably the most significant thing that can be tended to, and then the notion of engagement to spread out and find additional ways to engage your stakeholders, and that would include staff, students, parents, and community members. So let me walk through a little about the major findings. I'm not going to read these to you, but just kind of hit them as we go through. We found the notion of concise communication is a need to really focus and shorten content in emails. Folks are really looking for, bullets, boom, boom, boom. Again, that relates to, in part, they're reading it on a phone and they're trying to get information more quickly. We found a little bit of an information gap on some things in terms of some of outside Facebook groups are sharing information that is sometimes contradictory or confusing to families. Again, the notion of a need for an overall plan, that's something that we always talk about and really can help drive our work. We had a lot of conversation about the use of Let's Talk, and we made some suggestions there. Not that we stopped using it, but we extend engagement to other areas. So we start to use Let's Talk differently, and maybe promote it a little differently. We found the need through our assessments for additional engagement opportunities under the area of general communication, again, to really focus on finding more ways to engage people, to have more voices involved in the process, as well as to expand the process as well. And there's a need to keep the website more up to date. A website is a really interesting thing in school districts, because if you talk to 10 people, 5 people will love them and 5 people will hate them. And you've got the same thing. You've got people who think your websites are awesome, and then you have people who think your websites need a lot of help. And there's the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, that there's some need to update content as well as improved navigation. The next category of findings is communication from the district. There was a concern about timeliness, especially as it relates to issues related to the school board, financial decisions, some of those more significant topics. Folks were talking about trying to have information sooner and on the front end, rather than as the issue has been discussed, they want to know earlier about what's going on. You get very high marks for what you're doing with the COVID-related communication. Folks are very, very complimentary and talking about the effectiveness of that. In fact, a parent or two actually told us that, there's a lot of redundancy in that communication, which just tells us that you're sharing information in a variety of ways, and people are hearing the messages in a variety of ways. So you did a really, really nice job there. In terms back to the kind of the notion of engagement to help stakeholders understand the impact of decisions, not just what the decision was, but the kind of the why behind the decision. What impact was it, and how does it affect, and what's the why behind it is an important piece. And then also the whole notion of communication, again, being clear and concise and short, again, is an important thing. The next category is communication from the schools, and there's some opportunity here as well. A lot of parents are looking for some more opportunities for engagement at the school level prior to school decisions. So it's not just at the district level, they're also thinking about how might we be more engaged at the school level. There's also a need to create some easy to read and streamlined communications for families. Again, that goes back to the short, concise, and again, it's related to the fact that so many families, so many parents are looking at your communication on a device, and they really want something that they can process fairly quickly. And they highlight some of the special programs and services a school provides. There's a need for parents to understand a little bit more about what are the things that a school might provide for families and kids. And finally, the findings under staff communication. And again, the staff communication focus was in the focus group, but also as a part of the baseline audit. Again, we found there's really a need to have like a organized plan for that about how the district is connecting regularly with its staff members. And then again, the notion of engagement, not just engaging parents, but thinking about engaging staff members in the decision-making process and getting their insight and feedback prior to decisions being made, so they feel they have some insight I feel like they have some input into those decisions. And from that, and from all of the assessments we did, we came up with, again, these are a set of major recommendations. Again, there's some smaller ones in the other reports, but these are kind of the overview. Our first suggestion would be, again, under the general communications category, to really develop and think about an overall strategic communication plan. You have, and your team has, most of the pieces that need to be included. It just needs to be pulled together in a document. One of the things that happens, and I'm guilty of this when I was in school districts, when the longer you've been in this work, a lot of this stuff starts to come really naturally, and you just start doing things. But having that organized plan is really an important thing, and we have noted that in a number of places. We're thinking about and recommending kind of a different look and feel for your district and school e-newsletters. Again, thinking more about that bullet digest format to organize content more briefly and concisely. Sometimes we talk about kind of a bulleted format. To really create a process, kind of an ongoing process about engagement, and to think about what that looks like and what people's roles are. One of the things that's really important in engagement is for people to understand, if you're coming to me and asking for my insight and input, what's my role? Am I a decision maker? Am I an input giver? And to have clarity around that is really important. And then so people know when I'm giving insight and input, how that input is going to be used as well. We talk about here and recommend kind of an examination or a conversation of the Let's Talk function to really think about how that's used. We have some considerations in the baseline audit report about maybe reducing the number of categories, but also doing some other engagement to make sure you're hearing lots of voices and a variety of voices from your parents, staff, students, and community. And the fourth one here is to think about your social media strategy to think how we could use that to boost engagement, and then also have that tie into the overall plan and the overall strategy that you have. The next section is communication from the district, and again, as we think about ongoing projects or ongoing initiatives, to think about how we create communications plans, and in some ways mini communications plans, to make sure we get that information shared with people effectively. A great example for you is the COVID model that you've used, because it has been, from a parent perspective, very well received, and it's a great example of what you've done. There's also, again, this relates to kind of the incoming families enrollment, is to maybe do a little better job of talking about enrollment and connecting with new families. We've done some work in other districts where we focus more on kind of that enrollment and that marketing view. And that may be something that is a thought anyway, something to consider down the road. The next category is communication from the schools. One of the things that we and this kind of entails the first two bullets, is we heard, kind of the consistency between the communication that comes from teachers and schools. Some teachers are really good at it, some teachers aren't as good at it. And to really sit down and spend some time, put together a working group to lay out some expectations. So it is clear from a principal's perspective, from a teacher's perspective, what's expected from me, and what are the expectations that the organization has for me to communicate with the parents. And finally, the thought about the website, to really look at school websites to make sure that we have information that's both consistent across websites, but also is updated and timely, and is shared with families as well. And finally is the notion of the staff communication. And again, we talk about that internal communication piece is probably the greatest need, and that would be something that I would suggest that we have an internal strategy that is built right into your overall plan, as well as the engagement model. That's one of the things that the staff that we talked to, and again, that was one focus group, but it also connected to our findings in the baseline audit, that there really was a need to have that sort of connection and engagement with staff to make sure they share that input. And in terms of staffing considerations, we're always careful with this, because there's lots of things that go into decisions about staffing. So we're careful because we understand all that. But a couple things we wanted to share. First of all, the service and the productivity that you're getting from the team that you have is really, really exceptional. They're doing great work. They're really doing a nice job of getting communication out. Again, it's not perfect, but you're really being served well by them. And the thought of, as you continue to look to grow and enhance your communication, the thought of adding a position may be something to think about. And we like to think about these positions more about as an investment. For example, if you added a staff member and we were able to now focus more on internal communication, the investment of dollars would pay off down the road in goodwill and good feelings. So in terms of this, we often like to think about the investment in communication pays off someplace down the road. So those are just a few thoughts about as you continue to have these conversations, what a staffing thought might look like. A couple other just really quick things before we end. We just want to thank the board members, the parents, Superintendent Pearson, for allowing us to participate. When a school district does this, it's really opening itself up to its community and saying, help us understand and let us know. And there's and that's a powerful thing. People often comment to us that they appreciate being involved and they appreciate being asked. We also want you to know that we appreciate the trust in us to do this. We had a blast. This was so much fun. We were in contact with Carol on a regular basis, and we really enjoyed our work in this area. And then finally, both Carol and Janelle, to thank them for their work. Doing these audits, doing these, especially the 4 assessments we did, required work from them, and they were awesome. Our work was made easier based on what they provided to us. So with that, I'm going to, and my contact information is there. If you have a question or comment, feel free to email. With that, I'm going to be quiet and answer questions and invite Brett to come in and share his thoughts as well.
Okay, well, why don't we start with board members? Do any of the board members have any questions about what we just heard? Anyone? No. Okay.
I thank you for the work. Thank you, Mrs. Smith and your team. I enjoyed my interview. We had a good conversation.
Yeah.
And I assume we'll get the whole report. Is there?
There are several pieces of it, and I'm happy to give it to you. Yes.
Okay, that'd be great. I just am, I'm more curious than not.
In our preparation for this, we just decided not to load you with, because it's a lot of stuff, and it's 4 separate documents, and we just tried to pull it all together in the spirit of not swamping you, because it can get pretty deep, and some of it's really technical, more kinds of things that Carol and Janelle need to think about, and they're more tactical in nature. But there's a lot of stuff there that may or may not be interesting to you, but you're certainly welcome to look at it.
Thank you. And I guess the real next question is to Dr. Pearson or Mrs. Smith. What do you see now as kind of the next steps? And that's all I have.
I can speak generally. I think one of the things that we want to do is take this information and go ahead and begin to build that district communication plan, as well as think about some of our strategic next steps. I like the way that they have it organized with the, do now, the 3 categories. I certainly think that those are things that we want to talk about, and I would see that we would come back to the board with some strategies around the feedback that they have collected.
And as a current practicing school PR person, as we said, Carol and her team are doing so much, and so that'll have to be placed in along with everything else that's on their plate. But we do see that as being so important, and I think that roadmap will help with that efficiency and that effectiveness, really and truly, of that plan, and being able to leverage those areas that Bob mentioned on those big ticket pieces. So.
It's already been very helpful to just see their roadmap, and it's always interesting to hear what someone from the outside, their perspective. And I appreciate that 2,000 parents took the time to complete this survey, because we have been surveying our parents a lot over the last several months, and to have people take the time to really be thoughtful in their responses, I so appreciate that as a practitioner. And we had parents that were very willing to go through focus groups and answer some additional questions. And that is going to make my roadmap a lot easier to be able to serve our constituents.
Yeah, Bob and I both had the pleasure of meeting with some of your parents, and they have a lot of passion, and they have a lot of opinions, but it was very, very clear that they're very prideful of your school district, and they appreciate the communication efforts that are going on currently.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns on this item? I just want to point out that it is 8:49, so we've been here for nearly 4 hours. So we have one more item, and it's probably one of our big items. So we should probably, if no one has any objections, move on to item 5D, learning gaps.
Hello, everyone. I'm back, and I was predicting that there would be several long agenda items, knowing the importance of the other things on our docket for this evening. Last week, at both the board meeting as well as the business services meeting, we received feedback from parents and students, sharing the challenges that they have faced with teaching and learning, with social emotional challenges, and just other things that the pandemic has brought upon either their learning environment or their family situation. And we are extremely empathetic for everything that the parents shared, that the students are sharing, and that we hear of from students wanting more support for their learning. But we also heard from parents who are extremely happy with the work that we're doing and really are thankful for the teachers for the going the extra mile to make sure that students are being as successful as possible. Our plan is for our January 19th meeting to bring back a robust overview of all of the things that we have been doing during semester one. For example, we had a preliminary data set of our DNF list and things that the high school staff was doing to lower those numbers. We will have the actual report and be ready to share those results. And again, some of the interventions that teachers used in the place. In addition, we will be sharing our mid-year point for our iReady data for the elementary and middle schools. That will show some of the enormous growth that our students have been making in both reading and mathematics. And again, some of the things that we have been doing in the classroom and during asynchronous time to support individual learners. So what I wanted to do tonight, knowing that a comprehensive report is coming on January 19th, was share, again, just some examples from the classroom, the school, and the district level that are examples of things that we have done to respond to the learning gaps that we know some students are experiencing. First, the personal learning time, we have 30 minutes each afternoon at the elementary school, and it's time when students receive interventions from their teacher or extensions or practice activities from their iReady. Elementary AT math teachers are holding office hours in the afternoon for students. High school teachers are requiring students with missing work to attend office hours remotely, using reteaching strategies via one-on-one and small group instruction. In general, teachers continue to hold students to high standards for proficiency of learning, but are flexible with how students arrive at their learning via extensions, alternative assessments, giving students more choice, etc. At the site level, social workers are using telehealth tools to facilitate groups via Zoom. Student support teams have gone on home visits to check in on students, making connections with families and assessing what basic needs are unmet to help move the student and family forward. And again, just a few days ago, many of our schools held holiday parties via Zoom to keep students connected to each other and to the school community. And at the district level, our district did for the first time a student engagement survey to gather input directly from students on what instructional strategies and teacher interactions help them connect and stay focused on their schoolwork. Tutors are being provided for EL students and for remote students from schools who receive Title I funds. Students were recommended by teachers to receive additional supports in math, reading, or English language development. Some have started in December and the rest will begin in January. And finally, again, we talked about how food service, we definitely ramped that up to make sure meals are available for all students, but especially those who may be in need, and meals were delivered this morning for 7 days, and they will be delivered again next Monday for 7 days. Finally, while some students may be receiving less content, They are more likely to practice and to have been practicing and strengthening their learning to learn skills, those that are needed to navigate through the pandemic. Examples of that would be using technology to create evidence of their learning. We have students who have been making podcasts, who have been writing, rewriting, triple writing essays and giving each other peer feedback on their work. Students have been making slideshows. You name it, they have been using technology not just to consume information, but to create evidence of learning. Students also report needing to practice and strengthen their time management skills. We know students are getting opportunities to work independently at their own pace, and again, communicate with teachers when they need more or extended time. And finally, students are becoming better problem solvers. They're strengthening their adaptability and flexibility and looking for multiple solutions to the complicated challenges that they face. So again, we plan to provide a comprehensive update on student achievement for semester 1 at our Learning and Teaching Committee meeting on January 19th, but wanted to share some of these preliminary examples with the board, just again as evidence of the hard work that our teachers are doing and that the work that our district has been doing to reach out to families and for both academic and social emotional challenges. Again, I'll be ready as our other members of the learning and teaching team to answer any specific questions you have, but we feel like we will be able to give a more comprehensive presentation and have it be supported by data in our January meeting.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments, concerns? Okay, I'm looking at the clock and kind of guessing that probably not, especially when we're going to be getting some more detailed things in January. So does anybody have any objections if we move on really to discuss what's going to happen in the future?
No, I just want to say thanks, Dr. Herman, for that update on the things that kids are learning and how they're getting intervention and enrichment. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have gotten a lot of information tonight, and I would like to thank everybody who's been here, and it's been yeoman's hours here, putting in time for this to answer questions, being ready to answer questions, and some rather in-depth presentations. So I appreciate all of that. The next item is to discuss what we were going to talk about in the future. We did hear one item for January. Do we have any other items that are potentially on the docket? Dr. Herman?
Well, again, that one is sort of multifaceted. We had said earlier that we were bringing back the high school where we had them talk about the learning gaps and how they were measuring things in semester 1, and we would have an update in semester 2. The other facet of that from the high school will be to give the final results from the DNF and have that comparison from previous years. And then again, talking about student growth, we will have an update on the iReady for elementary and middle schools. So again, each one of those, there's almost 4 separate agenda items there.
Right.
But again, and should there be anything else that the board is interested in hearing about, we would love to prepare something for you for January.
Okay. All right. Well, and I'm assuming that we are not doing meeting comments at the end of the meeting here. We would have none. So I believe, and that meeting, by the way, is January 19th. I think we've mentioned it a couple of times. So January 19th is the next L&T meeting. So I believe we can adjourn at 8:59.